story and say some things very exactly. So I hope it's okay that I read these
Dr. Bishop,
prepared
take your
remarks.
time. You're
Yes.
our foreign guest, so I told my team to be sure that our foreign experts, we don't want to rush you. We don't know. Welcome to join us anytime, but we want you to be able to express yourself well, and we're all ears. So go ahead.
Well, that's terrific, and I appreciate your having me. And I want to leave time for any questions that that the committee or the public may have too. So this will take about 10 or 12 minutes, and then we'll have a few minutes for questions, if that's okay. Good. So let me start off with the mission of education, which of course we all know. Most educators and society at large believe that the mission of education is to transmit knowledge and experience from the previous generation to the next. Parents and teachers are the major socializing force for young people. Families and schools make them social, make them able to be adults in an adult world. As a result, the curriculum includes history, mathematics, science, literature, all of which were created by brilliant people in the past, presumably so students could use that in their future as adults. However, that knowledge and experience is useful only to the extent that the student's world in the future is the same as the world of the past. Much of it is because it contains perennial knowledge and insight about the world and about our human condition. On the other hand, much of what we teach might actually be irrelevant if the student's world in the future is not the same as the world of the past. In fact, at the extreme, we may simply be preparing them to be successful in the world of the 20th century rather than the 21st. We all agree, my second point is that we all agree that one of the most significant changes since that curriculum was developed is the information and communication revolution. Not only can workers and citizens with access to digital tools create information like never before, they can also broadcast it across the world at almost no cost. The current curriculum was developed when information was scarce, when it was hard to get, and developed by a few trusted sources. Information is now abundant, superabundant, orders of magnitude more plentiful than it used to be. Information is now readily accessible, just a few clicks away on a smartphone. And it used to be trusted, but it is now swamped by other sources of information and perspectives. As a result, knowing in a world of scarce and hard to get information was the advantage that we all used to become successful. We were smart and we knew a lot. But knowledge is now a commodity. Knowing a lot is not as important as it used to be. Everybody has it and can easily get it. And even choosing what is important to know has changed. Today, each group has its own facts, its own version of history, and its own narrative about what is going on. Which of these facts, versions, and narratives should we teach? The third point then is, in my opinion, is not to teach new facts or even what we think are the right facts. My recommendation is simply to shift the mission of education from transmitting facts and knowledge to developing skills and attitudes. We can no longer count on what we know, but rather on what we can do with what we know. It is no longer important to remember facts that we think are right, but rather to sort through all the facts and to come to reasoned conclusions on our own. We need to learn to develop our own facts, our own version of history, and our own narrative based on what we see and hear around us, rather than wait for someone, a teacher or anyone else, to tell us what to think and what is right. Success in school today means getting the right answer, whether it's a question to be answered or a problem to be solved. And educators who want their students to be successful in school have unfortunately created a curriculum that focuses almost exclusively on questions that have a right answer and problems that have a right solution. Think of your history, math, or science classes. Getting the right answer got you the A, the passing grade, the promotion, the diploma, and your ticket to be successful in life. Yet how often have you encountered questions or problems in your adult life that have one right answer or one right solution? Most decisions we make today are not between right and wrong or between good and bad, but rather between better and worse. Being able to deal with multiple answers and solutions at the same time and to decide which to choose is a skill, one that is not taught very often in school today. So let's make school more like real life, appropriately scaled to the developmental age of the student. Did you ever wonder why most students like sports or theater or music more than history or math? It is because they are learning a skill, not learning facts. They're pursuing what educators call mastery learning, never ending, always improving, rather than performance learning, getting a good grade on a test. We all believe that a student's education should not end at commencement. Things will change so much in their lives that they will need to be lifelong learners. Are we teaching them how to be lifelong learners? I would argue no. We are teaching them to be lifelong students, ingesting information and reproducing it for a grade. And who wants to do that forever? Most educators were good at being students, so as teachers, they reproduce that system in their classes. What if we change the name of the occupation, however, from teacher or instructor, telling students what to know, and to learner, or even master learner? If you want to learn to dance, you find someone who is a good dancer and wants to share their skill and their joy of dancing. Are teachers joyful learners? Some are, but most are not. More often, they believe that school is not fun, that learning is hard because it is unnatural, and therefore must be imposed from the outside. Education today is like building a house or a machine, where you have to acquire all the materials and fasten them together one at a time. What if it were more like growing a garden or even raising a child, where you create a healthy environment and let life take over and produce itself? I wish that schools were more like gardens and less like factories or construction sites. I'm almost to the end of my remarks, but I would like to share one little piece of this vision for education that I believe is critical. I'm a futurist, an academic futurist. I helped graduate students become futurists and foresight professionals for 30 years. When I retired from the university, I realized that I had been teaching about the future to adults. And I asked, who is talking to young people about their future, except in the most general terms? Who is helping them acquire the skills to anticipate and influence change? Who is helping them to understand the alternative futures they face and to choose the future they prefer and are willing to work for? Good teachers always prepare students for field trips. Who is preparing them for the most important trip of their life? The answer to that question, unfortunately, is almost no one. This committee is investigating the future of education for your country, and congratulations on embarking on that mission. And I hope you hear from young people about what they think and what they want for their future. But all of that is what I call the future of education, the future seen from the outside. Teach the Future promotes the future in education, not just consulting with young people about the future, but bringing the future to where they live and work in their schools. In conclusion, my overall recommendation is to teach skills more than knowledge. And the two important skills are how to anticipate and influence change in the future. We know how to teach that now. We have been teaching it at the university for 50 years. It's now time we invited young people to learn about the future as well. So I am delighted to be asked to appear at this hearing, and I hope I have placed your task in our history to be written in the future. History is a story with 3 chapters, not 2. The past is how we got here, the present is where we are, and the future is where we are headed. We ought to think and teach about all 3 chapters in schools today for the sake of our young people who will live and thrive in that future more than we will. I truly appreciate the opportunity to be with you, and thank you for listening. And if we have time, I would be delighted to answer any questions or discuss any comments you may have. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bishop. The time difference there, it's around midnight there, right? Because
11 p.m., yes.
yeah, we normally do our questions later, but I don't want to keep you up the whole time. So
Thank you very much. You're very kind.
I'm going into the past. You're what 12? How many hours behind us? So
Yes, you're in my future. Yes, definitely.
yeah, we are your future. So on that note, I will be happy to entertain questions from anyone in the panel. You know, we don't always. I mean, COVID has provided us with this opportunity to create Zoom hearings. We never had this before, and that's what allows you to be here tonight with us, Dr. Bishop. So I'll throw the first question, but Senator Amy and actually any of our resource person, if you have any questions, let's take advantage of the presence of our experts. So my question is very simple, Dr. Bishop. When you say, let us teach the children how to anticipate and deal with change, which is what adult life is really like. I appreciate that. Adult life is rarely correct answer and wrong answer. It's usually somewhere in between. And I totally agree that it should really be a question of, I mean, sometimes there's really wrong answers, but more often it's more like, well, what is the better one? Or maybe the better one for this person, but not the better one for the other person. Or maybe the better answer for a certain segment of the population, but maybe not for everyone right away. And therefore the answer will change in 6 months or in a year. And just to put something that we can all relate to right now is obviously the lockdown was very difficult financially and economically, but it was a step that I believe many, predominantly most countries have agreed to take, save for Sweden that took a different approach. I don't know about some states in the United States. So my point is, but then that can't last forever. So depending on when that question was asked, the answer would change. So my question to you is, can you educate us? And many of us here are not educators. I am, just for your info, a daughter of an educator. So that is my sole background in education.
That's wonderful.
And my mom is watching now, and I thought she would like this topic. She's a preschool. She's an early learner education educator. Anyway, so that's what I'd like to know. Like, could you somehow explain a little bit to us how you would break it down in helping these children? And obviously that would change per age group. So I'd like an idea, if we're talking about 6 and under, we're talking about 6 to 10-year-old or 6 to 12, how do you create these scenarios? And obviously as a parent, I'd like to think that I've tried to do that, sit down with your child and do this, but I'm thinking more like in the classroom setting. How do you create this curriculum that builds on that concept, preparing for them for decision-making skills that they will encounter in life?
Well, the very first thing to recognize, and I didn't put it in the prepared talks, but that teaching skills is so very much different. We ought not to underestimate. Teachers today know how to teach facts. They know how to teach what's in the textbook. And that's what we learned, you and I and the same people in our generation. If I were teaching for young children, I would ask them first, well, what's the question? And what are your answers to the question? Now, sometimes you get pretty good answers. Sometimes you get fantastical answers. But then it's a chance to teach the skill of evaluating and analyzing what's the answer that you have proposed, and why is it a good answer, and why is it a not so good answer? Why is the student next to you who came up with a different answer, why is their answer a good answer? or not answer. Notice that we're putting the student in charge, we're putting the student in the center of learning rather than the teacher telling the students what to know. We are giving them the opportunity to learn and to practice how to be evaluators of information. And I believe even the youngest child, appropriately taught by people like your mother who are very good at talking to young children, had that as the learning objective, the skill of coming up with answers and evaluating those answers and discussing those answers with other people, providing evidence, talk about consequences. None of this, and I'm not even talking about scenarios. I'm not talking about doing scenarios or projections or strategic plans. Just the thought process that goes into being an adult in the world today, as you say, is more about evaluating better and worse, not about coming up with right and wrong. The problem is that when we are in business or even in civic life, it's all about the argument of what's the right answer. If people would back up and say, wait a minute, there is no one right answer. If we taught that in schools today, and maybe it will take a whole generation, I think we would have a lot more civil discourse. We would have a lot better decision making in business and in government and in civic life if we stop looking for the one right answer or the one right solution. I think we can teach that to very young children. Now, I don't know how to do that. I've been teaching graduate students my whole life, so my mind is clearly warped by that. But people like your mother and elementary teachers, if they had that as a curriculum objective, I think they would be able to give students lots of opportunity to practice that skill.
Okay, that's wonderful, Dr. Bishop. So obviously, I can see that happening in the subject matters like social studies, even history. A lot in history, like I mean, as a history what do you call it aficionado. I like looking back at history and saying like, wow, these things were acceptable then. And you don't even have to go that far, but some things were acceptable 20 years ago and totally not acceptable now. More so things that were acceptable 100 years ago. So even that is easy, I think, for most teachers to explain like, see,
Yes,
so
that's what history is, yes.
we can condemn them because in our time now that was totally not acceptable, but to help these children understand that, well, this is how it was in that time, and that's
But
just the way
notice what you're teaching when you teach exactly that, and we should teach that. We're teaching the history of difference. People used to be a way, and we are not that way. It's like teaching cross-cultural. Some people in other countries are a way, and we're not that way, and we respect their way. What we don't do in history is teach the long story. We teach a deep dive into a period, a person, a technology, but we don't teach the long sweep of history of change and what the mechanisms and the dynamics of change are. And most importantly, we don't deal with the fact that the people in those historical periods were just as confused and just as uncertain as we are. There's a popular historian in the United States who writes for the New Yorker magazine. In a podcast, in an offhand remark, it wasn't even what the podcast was about, she said, of course, the job of the professional historian is to rescue the uncertainties of the past, that there were alternatives, that people argued about that they made choices about that. And our present is the result of how they dealt with their uncertainties and the influences they'd put on directing the future to one thing or the other. I would like that to be more the subject. What was it like to be that person? Indeed, one technique is to have students play the various roles of people in a significant piece of history when people were arguing or deciding or debating. And so one student is A and one student is B, and they actually study those people and they represent them. They say, this is what I think. This is what I want. And the other people say, no, this is what I think. I think we would get a much deeper view that, yes, the people of the past did things and had a world that we don't have. But on the other hand, we are all humans and we're all dealing with change, some faster, some slower, but we're all dealing with change and we are dealing with it The people in the history class don't know the end of their story. They don't know how it turned out. We forget that. We think of it as a whole story. Oh, there's, whatever revolution or the technology and they know they didn't know their whole story. They only knew the first 2 chapters of their story. So there are ways of teaching even history that I think that bring skills into play as opposed to facts. And I'm not against facts. You have to know something. You can't be, completely without facts. I'm talking about emphasis. So once we learn something, okay, here's what happened in this historical period. Now let's pretend we're those people. What were they interested in? What did they debate about? What were they unsure about? What decisions did they make? If it were more fluid like that, I believe, frankly, we would be more comfortable in our present, realizing that we are not so different, that we're confused, but they were also confused. We need to make decisions in the face of that confusion. They made decisions in the face of that confusion. That's a history class, frankly, that I'd rather take than most of the ones that I took.
Very interesting, Dr. Bishop. I mean, I use history because I go through that thought process.
Oh, that's good. Excellent.
Even when I'm watching historical novels, good. Even historical love stories, I go through that process as a fun thing.
Right.
But interestingly, when I mentioned that to you, you had this whole you presented this whole picture of how it can be taught. So would you actually say that history, the subject matter of history, would be one of the easiest way or the most should be highlighted in the teaching in the introduction of futures thinking? Or can you, because my next question was, I'm just relating it to how interesting it is in history, does it make it that hard to introduce the concept of futures thinking in history? Is it that easy to do it with other subject matters? So, for example,
I want to tell you a favorite story. One of the best teachers that I ever knew was a math teacher in community college, grades 13 and 14, in Michigan, state of Michigan. She was teaching calculus. And there's sometimes a difficult process in calculus called integration. You have a formula, and when you integrate that formula, you end up with a second formula. Rather than tell students all the rules of integration, and she did some of that, but she gave them two columns and said the left-hand column is the beginning and the right-hand column is the end result. What's the rule that goes from the left-hand column to the right-hand column? And they spent a whole class on that. They got in teams, they talked about it. They said, well, maybe if we do this, or divide by 10, or take up to a power, whatever. And whether they got the right answer or not is not so important, because she's going to tell them what the rule is at the end. But they've had the process of taking a problem where they had to begin to investigate it, work together, come up with better and worse answers to that. Well, that rule worked for the first 3 rows in the table, but not for the last 3. So what's the rule now? And working, you can see where that could be a class, that could be a whole week. And you could even teach math by discovering rules rather than being told what the rules are. And you can make a game out of it. Who's got the rule? What's the rule? How does that rule work? I mean, I taught statistics for quite some time before I started teaching futures, and I didn't teach it that way. I wish I had. It would have been a lot more interesting.
Okay, so I think I'm getting the picture. Like, whatever the subject matter, it's really embedding in their way of thinking, embedding that different way of thinking. So not just memorizing, not just okay, this is the rule, fine, that's the rule, I'll live with it because my teacher says that's the rule. It's really putting that frame of mind of exploring, considering other options, how to the process.
And there are constraints. Remember, I said it's not anything you think of as okay. No, there is a rule that works that moves the left column to the right column. There is a right way of thinking about a particular group of people in a period of history. No, that's fantastical. They were not, aliens or whatever. But what can we arrive at that we all agree is fairly close? So it's thinking creatively within constraints. And that's the way we live. We have to make up the best solution we can given all the trade-offs, given whatever the budget is, given whatever the time is, we come up with the best solution. We're not giving students in the early years or through high school the chance to learn and practice that. And I can't emphasize the teaching skills and learning skills is done not by PowerPoints, not by textbooks. That's not the way students learn their sports, the way they learn to dance, the way we as parents learn to raise our children. We had a little bit of instruction, I hope, a few books, and our parents would help us, but it was mostly trying and practicing and going forward. If that were the school day, if that were the school year, and at the end of the year, students felt, wow, I've achieved this level of mastery, I've improved this far, and next year I'm going to improve more, and next year I'm going to improve more. I mean, even the most gifted cellist or basketball player is still practicing, is still trying to learn more, and they don't end because they graduate or they get into the professional league. They're continuing to practice, and they love it. Well, it's hard, but they love it. And I wish we could instill that kind of, quotes, love or challenge into the academic subjects and not just for the extracurricular subjects. I mean, you're the Senate committee. If you had guidance for, I don't know, the Senate cannot legislate that much in education, but the guidance for the country is to back up some, not 100%, but back up some from teaching the knowledge, the facts, the right answers, and giving students the opportunity to figure things out for themselves. That's what I said. Educators have made it, I hate to say this, because my wife's an educator, my daughter's an educator, my heart goes out to educators. They've made it too easy for students, largely because they know how to teach and to test for facts. They don't know how to teach and assess skills. There are ways, but it's harder. It's more subjective. It's more judgmental. We have to be able to do that in order to give students the practice that they need at performing these adult skills before they get out into the work world, before they graduate from college and say, well, now I have all the answers. And, they get to work and they find out that very few of those answers really count. The businesses, people graduated really smart. They know a lot. Don't know what to, they don't, a lot. They don't know how. A discussion with a college once, and I said, teaching them facts. Did you ever teach them of what to do with those facts? How to use history or how to use science, not being a professional scientist, not being a professional historian, but should you be able to use history as a citizen, as an employee, as a parent? And that would be, I think, a great theme for a history curriculum, using history, not just learning the facts, of which you have to learn some, but also using it for persuasion, using it for problem solving, using it for self-reflection, for enlightenment, whatever. That to me would be a terrific learning objective in a history class, which is not just knowledge.
Thank you. Dr. Bishop, I have a specific question here that I'm going to read to you, but I'm going to tie it in also to my question. So they're kind
please, yeah, of course.
questions. So the one question is, and I think it's similar to my earlier question, how can we integrate futures literacy as an essential skill in education? Now, I tie that up to my next question also, which is basically, do you have views as a futures thinker and as a teacher of this subject matter on whether certain subject matters should be eliminated from the curriculum, or should there be less emphasis on it, such that at some point, obviously, we all need to read, and more than read.
Oh yeah, those are skills. So those are absolutely essential skills, of course.
At what point do you say that kids at a certain age can start deciding what are these skills that they love? Like, at what point do you say that this young person or child even can spend 10 hours a week on his music because that's his passion.
Right,
And then
right.
he will spend the other 10 hours spread out with other subject matters that are still life
Yep.
skills and
Yes.
basic academics that they need to know. Do you have that,
Right. Yeah. No, I know the question. My daughter went to a model a magnet school in Houston that was for the performing arts, and her major was theater. And they had a school day that was half academics, traditional. Frankly, my wife and I were not all that excited about that part. But the other half of day, they were junior theater actors, directors, and stage managers as 11th and 12th graders. They were not professionals, but they spent a half a day, 5 days a week being in that role. Now, she never went into theater. She never
okay.
used that skill in the industry, but she learned responsibility. She learned how to present herself. She is now an extraordinary teacher and an extraordinary facilitator and an extraordinary presenter because she knows the dynamics of herself and the people she's talking to and things like that. Now I'm biased. I'm her father, so I'm excited about that. But nevertheless,
Sounds good.
you could teach all the subjects within music. You could teach history within music. You could teach mathematics within music and harmonies and that. You could teach physics in music about sound and the production of sound from different instruments and things like that. You could teach literature, music about literature. So, it, and I don't know that you could take one student and all make it all that. But if they were allowed to pursue their interest, and then weave that back in, and let's talk about the history of this. Let's talk about the science of this. Let's talk about the mathematics of what you would, I think, get a lot more engagement and you would get a lot more interest, and they would see what they're learning about the math is relevant to their interest. Right now, we're doing x squared plus y squared equals z squared. Well, that's Pythagoras told us that. That's a true statement. But I think in the back of the student's mind is, I mean, and I had this for my other daughter, who was not quite the student that the second one was. What am I going to do with this? Why am I going to learn this? She hated math
I'm still waiting to discover the
exactly.
in my life. I've memorized
Exactly.
that. I use that example all the time. I know one day I will realize the importance of that.
No, I don't think you will. I don't think you will. So I'm
I
not
mean,
going
we're
to
getting
go
hopeful.
after. I'm not going to go after any particular subject, but it should be relevant not just to the student's adult life, but to their current life. Why am I learning this? What can I do with it now? And if we had more emphasis on that, we would get more engagement and we would be teaching the skills that they need to survive high school, which is a challenge, plus the skills they need to survive the workplace. Skills, skills, skills.
Well, in that sense, I think you answered the next question, but feel
Good.
free to elaborate. Undersecretary Brenda Manzano of our Department of Science and Technology said, "Isn't the future already now?" And that's kind of what you were just saying just now.
Well, a lot has happened. And in that sense, we are experiencing our future from years ago. We're experiencing our parents' and our grandparents' future, but we also have a future that is yet to be discovered. So I would love to talk with the undersecretary about that statement. The future is now. Yes, there is a lot of what we are experiencing today that was predicted and forecast and prepared for. Obviously, a lot that was not. And how do we now use that experience to prepare for things that we think are pretty sure in the future, or prepare for things that we have no idea that they will happen? There is a way to do that. We do that in graduate school. We did that at the University of Houston. We're doing that at a number of universities around the world. Not enough, but we should be doing it everywhere because there is a way of preparing for uncertainty, dealing with uncertainty, indeed embracing uncertainty in order to be successful in the future. And we have to open up to, and you have people, colleagues of mine right there in the Philippines, who are doing that and know how to do that. So if there is guidance to the committee and to the Senate and obviously to the Department of Education, go look for those people and say, Dr. Bishop said you can actually teach people how to do this. What would you say? And I will. You'll be very surprised that they know how to do it.
Madam Chair, if I may.
Sorry, I was on mute. Go ahead, Senator Maimie. Go ahead.
Yes, no, just a quick question, follow up on what's being said. Earlier, Dr. Bishop spoke of bringing the future to kids' homes, their schools, their playgrounds, and everywhere. In the horrible context of isolation and COVID, what are the concrete steps that you can recommend for bringing the future to each of these places and venues that students go to?
Well, I really was talking about bringing the future to their schools where they tend to live most of the day, and where they
Yes.
had up till obviously before this virus so upset everything. Where students are, I don't think is so significant. In fact, if there is an opportunity for them to become independent learners, it is more the opportunity now as the teacher is not right there in the room. Now, that's difficult. And again, all of this will require immense rethinking and immense retraining. But how can a teacher stimulate students a few minutes on a Zoom call and have them go off and investigate something and do research and creativity on their own? So as long as the teacher is not responsible for 25, wiggly bodies being in a room all at the same time, I believe that they could give the students the opportunity to learn on their own and then to come back and say, this is what I did. What do you think? Let's talk about it. Work with other students over the same link we're using right here. It is a very strange environment, no doubt about it. But we as adaptable humans can learn to not just adapt to that environment, but to use the benefits of that environment. I took the whole master's degree at the University of Houston and made it a completely 100% online degree. And people said, well, that's going to ruin the degree. No, I could tell you that there were absolutely advantages to that. And not only could we serve students from around the world, but we can also do it in a way that I couldn't do in a face-to-face classroom. So there are advantages to the current situation, and there are lots of downsides.
Yes. Thank you very much for
Absolutely. I appreciate the question,
thank you very
Senator.
much for showing us the possibility of seizing opportunities.
That is what we're
terrible
trying to do these
pandemic.
days. Yes.
What is the role, do you think, of parents in facing these challenges so that they're hand in glove with the teachers?
Wow, that's a tough one because parents came from the same education system that the teacher did. And it will be, they would have to be open to cooperating with the teacher. Obviously, if students are at home, cooperating with the teacher on what the teacher's objectives are, what the teacher's approach is, but almost being partners in that. One thing I wanted to do in Teach the Future, one thing I wanted to create was if your students are learning about the future in school, here's a handout that you take home to show your parents. Here's what we're learning in school, Mom. Let's talk about this. Or let's ask this question. Or let's go talk to Grandma about this. There are home exercises where people can talk about their past and their future and their present in ways that I think with some guidance. We've basically delegated that whole responsibility to schools. And there's good reason for professional education. On the other hand, it would be nice that parents were more partners in that socializing process that I talked about, in the learning process, creating a learning environment in the home, just like the teacher is trying to do in school. We've basically left parents, I think, out of the process for some extent for good reason, but it's a shame. It's too bad.
Thank you.
Absolutely, Senator. Enjoyed it. Thank you very much for the question.
Just an observation, Dr. Bishop. I was going to say when you were talking about your daughter's experience in the theater school in her 11th and 12th grade, that appears to me to be more similar to the European models of apprenticeship, where anywhere
Yes.
between the 9th, 10th, 11th grade, that they already start focusing on a skill that they're going to learn. Correct? And
Yes.
which goes into my next question. So would you actually say that the models of the future that you would recommend would be something like that, where they get to really explore real life experiences or real life passions? Like we recently just passed in Congress, it's now a law that we have we now have a National Academy for Sports. That was actually
Oh, really? Okay, good.
that was actually my pet bill for the last 10 years.
Congratulations.
Precisely because I feel that these kids shouldn't be a choice. It shouldn't be get an education and therefore don't play your sports, or play sports and forget about the education. Again, I saw
Yes.
these models in other countries. So something like that. I mean, is that where you see that the future of education?
The downside of that European model, and it's been most implemented in Germany, I think, is that tends to create a two-tier system. That there are the academics who will go on to university, and then there are the apprentices who will go into the trades. And the trades are fine, but there does to create a two-tier system. Let me provide an alternative, and that is that even in the academic subjects, I use the concept of a master learner. So just like students would go to woodworking class and they learn from a person who knows how to make furniture, who knows how to use saws and lathes, and is a master at that particular art. What if we thought of teachers as being master learners? And here's a teacher teaching science, and he loves to learn about science. He's good at learning about science, not just telling you what he knows, but inviting you into his world through experiment, through demonstration. Look at this. See how this is. What do you think about this? Is this right? Is this not right? Why did this happen? How did this go? You could have a person, as I said, a dancing instructor is joyful most about sharing the world of dance with his students. I don't know that many physics teachers are joyful about sharing the world of physics with their students. But if they were considered master learners, look, I'm a good learner. I got good grades. I like it. I did very well. Come to class with me and you will learn the skills of this particular subject, just like you would if you went into auto mechanics or you went into something else. The academics do not have to be fact-based completely. They do not have to be theory-based completely. They do not have to be research-based completely. They should be at least 50%, if not more, the skills of that discipline rather than the facts of that discipline. And I think we could have apprentice scientists in 11th grade and apprentice historians in 11th grade, learning and being involved with as a master. If you want to learn to do sculpture, you go into, or you want to learn to do painting, you go into a painter studio and you paint. And they talk and they show you and they show that you see what the master has done and you see what you've done and you compare it. And that's the mastery learning. We could do mastery learning, I believe, in every single subject. It doesn't have to be two-tier.
I got it. Thank you. Thank you. That is not enough time to explore
It's a big subject. No, it's a big
the
subject.
the years of experience and expertise you've gathered. But I'd really like to thank you, Dr. Bishop, for your time.
Oh,
And
it's been wonderful.
I certainly hope that you'll oblige us with future guestings again.
I would love to, of course.
Thank you. There's so
All
much to
right.
learn.
Good luck
Thank you
with your
so much,
committee
Dr.
report. I'd
Bishop.
like to see the report when you come out with it. Can I see the report when you?
Definitely.
Okay.
Of course, we'll share it
Excellent.
with you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Goodbye.
Good night to you.
Yes.
Okay, so let's now proceed. After Dr. Bishop, I will now call on Dr. Anita, do I say that right? Sykes? Is it Sykes or Sykes Keller? And Dr. Anita is founder and director of Designer Futures Australia. Designer Futures is a value-based consultancy network providing advisory services that explore future landscapes, leverage emerging opportunities, and create pathways to future success of its clients. She's also co-founder of Center for Australian Foresight Australia, chair of the Millennium Project, and many more. So we're very excited to have you, Dr. Anita Keller. The floor is yours.
Thank you. I'd better unmute. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, I can hear you now very well.
That's great. And if I will apologise in advance if there's a raging storm outside, and if the power cuts, I'll have to rejoin you by phone. But otherwise, I will just work through.
Go ahead. Yes.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here. I would like to commend the government and for setting up this commission for the Sustainable Development Goals, Innovation and Futures Thinking, and also for the foresight shown in the development of Ambition Natin 2040. My experiences in the Philippines have been incredibly positive. I've run workshops with some of your people, and I've presented at conferences and met a lot of young people who are so keen to learn. It's wonderful to see this sort of program going through. I previously worked as a contract specialist with UNESCO as well on areas like world water scenarios, socially inclusive policy, in the lead up to the Sustainable Development Goals, and a regional forum in Asia called Rethinking Education Through Scenarios. I'm not going to present from that because it's freely available online, but I would suggest that someone on the Commission has a look at that and has a look and see what was developed from that. More recently, I've been working with global corporations to reinvent growth, to explore new ways of thinking and working to shape the next generation of globally responsible business leaders. This particular work is developmental, it's experiential learning, it is in unusual situations, in places, it travels. It's probably one of the most exciting experiences I've had as a learning and development professional. It's all adult learners, and they are all sort of part of the talent stream being developed to lead in the VUCA world, the volatile, uncertain, and complex and ambiguous world that we're currently entering, and will probably be living in for the next decade or two. I hope it's not the next century, the next decade or two. The program develops new markets and generates new products and services and shareholder returns while instilling a sense of purpose that attracts and engages talented employees. So it's primarily these sorts of experiences that I'm bringing to you today. I have previously taught at university, but my love is absolutely developing communities and organisations and doing long-term programs that really build that capability over time. I will start by asking you if there is anyone, I should say in the room, but maybe on the screen, who can accurately predict the future with 100% accuracy. Can anybody out there predict the future? Anybody? Anybody in the chat room?
I'm sure there are in the Philippines who will claim, but hopefully not in this room.
Good. Well, the no is the right answer. Bringing Peter Bishop's comments back, no is the right answer. It's not possible to accurately predict the future because the future is not predetermined. And as Peter mentioned, and I'm going to restate it here, the future that will eventually emerge is one created by the choices that we make today. And every day, over 7 billion people on planet Earth are making decisions and choosing where to go next, what to do next, what they will learn, what is important in their lives. So hence the future is uncertain. And if we accept that the future is uncertain, we recognize that more than one future is possible And our role as strategic foresight professionals, policymakers, planners, and educators is to explore multiple futures and create strategic options that are robust in each future, yet flexible enough for us to pivot to create the future we want as a people, as a country, and for the world. We talk about futures then rather than the future. The futures of work, jobs, skills, and education are enormous subjects, each in its own right, and would require a multitude of researchers to address. Fortunately for us, there is an extensive body of work in these areas, and from this work, I've chosen 3 points for my presentation today. The future of work, there are many ways I believe that we will think and work in the future. There are many different types of jobs, and not all of them will be new jobs. The second point is that in terms of the skills that need to be learned, there are hard skills and soft skills, and hard skills tend to be the shorter term, and soft skills tend to be for the longer term. I'll go into that a bit more in a minute. And the third point is about the importance of upskilling and lifelong learning, replacing the factory model of education, where traditionally people were taken into schools to learn reading, writing, and arithmetic so that they could work in factories in a hierarchical social order. So the future of work, many ways of thinking and working, as I said, and I think one of the things that's occurred to me during this period of lockdown is that paid work is not the only form of work out there. We don't always appreciate unpaid work. And as technology starts biting and taking low-skilled jobs, what are we going to do with the people whose low-skilled jobs are going? Are we going to develop a universal basic income? Are we going to provide some other kind of support? Are we going to, as Steve Jobs said, tax the robots so that the money earned from taxing robots educates people and reskills them? So I think there's a number of sort of quite exciting possibilities out there. The Sustainable Development Goals, as the world's greatest challenges, present us with the world's greatest opportunities to develop new markets, new industries, new jobs, and in short, to innovate. And 6 of the SDGs contain strong threads of social inclusion. My experience of meeting people in the Philippines is that the Filipinos have strong family values, and the Bayanihan spirit of community cohesion and cooperation. Perhaps the Filipinos could innovate together to achieve those goals that focus on the social inclusion aspects and create new jobs and new industries by exploring the possibilities of the Sustainable Development Goals. Some global corporations are already adopting new ways of thinking, working, and leading to reinvent business growth in alignment with the SDGs, partnering with the communities in which they operate and collaborating with their former competitors to create, for example, infrastructure that benefits all. One example of that is the need for LNG, liquefied natural gas, bunkering facilities in Asia so that ships could refuel using a more environmentally friendly medium and thereby collectively contributing to lowering pollution levels in the ocean. They're still competing at the business level, but they've been able to create that platform. So leading corporations like Unilever, Shell, Statoil, Woodside, IKEA, and others are changing their approaches from linear strategy to systems-level innovation and seeking new and often unconventional opportunities to open new markets, create new business models, and develop their most talented people to become the future business leaders with capabilities fit for navigating the future world. Those leadership skills are different to the leadership skills I learned at university more than 20 years ago now when I did a master's in leadership and development. These new skills are exciting for me to learn, but also exciting for me to facilitate learning experiences for other people. We can do similar programs in government if we choose. But again, coming back to the social inclusion aspects, it's not just about the talented people and the wealthy company. And while we see many world of work, which would lead you to think that it's all about new sciences and technologies such as artificial intelligence, nanotech, biotech, synthetic biology, all of these things. I don't think that will be the case. In the past, there were fears that industrialization would wipe out all agricultural jobs, and yet agriculture is still here. And displaced workers went to work in factories where they learned new ways of thinking and working. And the remaining agricultural businesses and workers also learned how to farm differently, using machinery and creating new products, services, and outlets for their wares. Along similar lines, we can be reasonably confident that a large number of low-skilled jobs will be automated over the next decade. And yes, robots and artificial intelligence are coming, but in my view, there is no need to fear. We humans have proven ourselves to be remarkably adept at learning new skills to work with new machines of many different kinds. And I see this as just another learning curve for us. As I mentioned earlier, the idea of a robot tax has been discussed in several countries as a means of generating funds for a universal basic income and other strategies to support displaced workers. But in my view, the funds will be well used to reskill these workers. In addition to the highly specialized jobs that involve working with next technologies, many jobs of the future will be similar to those of today. Not everything is going to change. For example, we still need people working in medical, human care services, creative industries, sales, education, and training. And I'm delighted that we have, I think you mentioned in your message earlier that we have some people from arts education, which is fantastic. I've really enjoyed my time working with the creative industries. And in that vein, bookstores and libraries haven't closed despite some publications being available to read or buy online, but they have had to reinvent themselves by thinking and working differently. So my second point comes back to the hard and soft skills. Over the next 10 years, 1.2 billion employees worldwide will be affected by the adoption of automation technologies and artificial intelligence. This is equal to the 50% of the world's economy, and according to the World Economic Forum, 50% of jobs will be changed by automation, but only 5% will be eliminated. 9 out of 10 jobs will require digital skills, and young, low-skilled and vulnerable people are all going to need help with upskilling. Reports concerning the future of work tend to focus on technological development. And quite simply, yes, the STEM skills, or as I call them, the STEAM skills, science, technology, engineering, arts, and maths, will continue to be needed for the foreseeable future as new specialized roles are created for the next wave of technologies. Skills in using digital technologies are undoubtedly important for the near to midterm as many products and services move from the physical space to online. At the same time, technology is changing so rapidly that a focus on learning how to use it, i.e. hard skills, is quickly outdated, and continual upskilling is likely to be required. The World Economic Forum, in its recent discussions about preparing people for the future of work, states it's much more than hard skills like learning new digital tools and competencies. The soft skills, leadership, adaptability, how to translate feedback into measurable change, are what makes the short-term skills training more long-lasting and transformative. Elon Musk, for example, says technology leadership is not defined by patents, but rather by the ability to attract and motivate the world's most talented people. It's about developing our people to be ready for this future. Longer term, more valuable soft skills such as creativity, empathy, as Peter Bishop mentioned, critical thinking, leadership, artistic expression, collaboration, and other qualities we think of typically as human are where humans excel. AI isn't very good at jobs that require these qualities, which is why, according to McKinsey Global, entire jobs or industries won't often be automated away completely. Meeting the challenges of this volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous VUCA world will also require an increased capacity for strategy, innovation, and agility. And these skills can be learned, but will only flourish in the right culture. Futures-ready leadership that is strategic, agile, flexible, and delivering what is needed is a genuine concern for 86% of HR and business leaders who cite leadership as an important or very important issue for their future. And what this suggests to me is that the current forms of leadership adopted in private and public sector organisations are not necessarily fit for the purpose of navigating future uncertainties. So leaders need to learn those new skills, how to lead in a VUCA world, how to develop their soft skills, and how to empower people and create a culture of lifelong learning where entrepreneurship can survive and thrive. So our focus then needs to be on upskilling our people to think and work in new ways, to innovate, and to manage artificial intelligence, robots, and other new technologies and machines as they are created using our human intelligence. My third point comes to education futures. I'm not going to predict education futures because, as I mentioned earlier, we can't predict the future. But there's a lovely quote from Eric Hoffer that says, "In times of change, learners inherit the earth, while the learned find themselves beautifully equipped to deal with a world that no longer exists." So for me, a commitment to lifelong learning is the best way for people to continually upskill and remain relevant in a VUCA world. And this goes beyond formal education in universities, training centres, colleges and schools. It includes non-formal and informal learning and development within the workplace, in our local communities, in our homes, and via digital technologies. It is a learning ecosystem that we need to develop to support lifelong learning. For the past 3 years, the Millennium Project has conducted a series of international Delphi studies to assess 20 long-range actions to address future work technology dynamics with relevant government agencies, thought leaders, and the media. This study was initiated in response to the often dystopian stories about robots and AIs replacing human and the perceived negative impacts of joblessness. I'm just going to share with you the top 5 most effective actions rated by the international panel that were education related. Number 1, increase focus on developing creativity, critical thinking, human relations, philosophy, entrepreneurship, individual and teams, art, self-employment, social harmony, ethics and values, to know thyself and to build and lead a meaningful working life with self-assessment of progress on one's own goals and objectives, similar to the one that Finland is now implementing. Number 2 of the 5 recommendations, include futures as we include history in the curriculum. Teach alternative visions of the future, foresight, and the ability to assess potential futures. Make teleeducation free everywhere, ubiquitous, lifelong learning systems. Number 4, shift education and learning systems more towards mastering skills than mastering a profession. And Peter Bishop touched on that as well. Number 5, in parallel to STEM, create a hybrid system of self-paced, inquiry-based learning for self-actualization and retrain teachers as coaches using new AI tools with their students, which I thought was really quite interesting. With those strategies, I think it's important to think about, we're still talking largely about people who have access to education. And I started thinking about a lot of developing countries. There is an inequality of lifelong learning opportunities. There's an inequality of access to good education. While the initial drive for upskilling aims to prepare people for next technologies and the 9 out of 10 jobs that require digital technology skills, it seems clear to me that the digital divide needs to be addressed if we're to take an inclusive approach to learning and development for our citizens. Elderly citizens, for example, and I'm thinking of my mother with this, she's 86 and she doesn't have a computer. She tried to use one and couldn't make it work. But increasingly she's finding that payment of her household bills, everything has to be done online. And so she's having to ask people to pay her bills for her because, you know, you can't pay cash bills or send a check anymore. Unemployed young people might lack the skills needed to present themselves online for interviews. And studies show that those in lower socioeconomic areas have lower ICT usage and even the basic digital competencies that are needed for many jobs. If you're coming from a poorer family and you don't have computers or you don't have a smartphone, something where you can engage in social media and pick up your ICT skills by playing with friends, it's really quite difficult to catch up. And I think there's a big divide there that we need to address if we are to engage the large number of unemployed young people in the world in meaningful employment. Government leaders and policymakers have it in their power to ensure that all citizens have the knowledge needed to participate in the digital economy, and that parts of the population are not left behind, consistent with social inclusion thread running through the SDGs. So in closing, welcome to the VUCA world, volatile, uncertain, complex and ambiguous. In this hyper-connected world, linear thinking, trends, forecasting and traditional approaches to strategic policy and planning don't work so well. Neither do silos in organisations or centralised leadership. Instead, strategic foresight, networked organisations and futures-ready distributed leadership are suitable approaches for a VUCA world. In a similar vein, formal qualifications in pursuit of a professional career, and I've done 3 degrees, so I can speak from a little bit of experience, it can take years to acquire, and they may well be outdated before they're completed. So it's vital that our established education systems transform and broaden beyond the formal education learned in universities, colleges and schools to include non-formal and informal learning in a learning ecosystem to foster lifelong learning. For the Philippines, it occurred to me that the strategic question might become, what unique gifts can we offer to the world? What are our core capabilities as a nation? How might our core strengths make a contribution to achieving the SDGs while opening up new markets, new industries and new job opportunities for our people? So in summary, the future of work, the world of work is changing. Some jobs will remain relatively unchanged. However, automation is expected to disrupt many low-skilled jobs in particular. Anticipating the needs for upskilling and providing programs to retrain workers likely to be displaced can start now. And strategic foresight can be used also to explore the potential of new industries for the Philippines and develop strategies to create new jobs. In hard and soft skills, short-term and longer-term, hard skills such as digital technology training is essential for many jobs, yet relatively short-term, and people will need to continually learn newer and better ways of working. Digital skills are also effective for effective participation in society in the future. Looking further ahead in a VUCA world, soft skills such as futures thinking, innovation and flexibility are vital capabilities for futures-ready leadership, and an organisational ability to pivot to remain relevant is critical. In education futures, huge opportunities for the education sector. All of these people that need upskilling, all of these people that are going to need lifelong learning. Education is the foundation for our futures. It's critical in the development of hard, shorter-term skills and soft skills for the longer term. And not just, as I mentioned, formal education, but the informal and non-formal sector, and developing that learning ecosystem. So in the spirit of Bayanihan, we create our future together. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Since you're also out of the country, and as you said, you have a storm brewing there, I'll go ahead and ask a few questions. And I also invite any of our resource persons or guests to feel free to send a message to the chat box or even raise your hand. If I catch your attention or my staff sees you, I'll call you. In the meantime, I'll just go ahead and ask a few questions.
Yes, please.
Okay, so again, thank you so much, Dr. Anita. I'm a big fan of developing soft skills. I've always been a believer that that basically sets apart a successful person versus somebody who's just very intelligent and maybe has the highest academic degrees, but don't have enough soft skills. Do we actually teach soft skills in school, especially in the. I mean, I know I've heard it often enough in the business world to know that there's consciousness about it, and so they're doing this as an after school, continuing learning kind of thing. But is it also now consciously being done, like say in Australia or in other areas? Because I feel like this is something that for now is more taught in the home. I'd like to think that I'm very conscious of it. I may not perfect it, but I'm human. I'm not an AI. So, but I feel like I learned this at home. So, in countries that are more advanced educationally, than what we currently are experiencing in our country, what can you say? Is that actually being taught in the lower levels?
I would say broadly no, but there are exceptions. Futures thinking and future studies is taught in some schools. A lot of it, I think, depends on the individual teacher, picking up the knowledge of the subject and building it in. But the Catholic education schools used to have a formal curriculum that was taught in primary and secondary schools. Haven't seen it for a while. I haven't been involved with them for a while, but I would assume that that material is still out there. Leadership, I think, tends to be not taught as a specific subject in schools. I think you go to university generally to develop your skills in leadership. But I believe that when we're teaching children in sports and to do teamwork, we are developing their leadership skills, even if they don't appreciate that that's what's happening.
Yeah.
And I think a certain number of skills are built through experiential learning programs outside of schools. I was chair of an environmental organisation which was run by children, completely, 100% run by children. The only reason I got to be chair of the organisation is because they're not old enough to contract under law. So we had to have some adults to do the contracting and to make sure they were safe and so on. But generally speaking, they did everything. They did the research, the planning, they contacted experts. All of the learning was generated by them. And that started as young as 8 years old. The main cohort was, I would say, between 8 and 14. And they literally learned it all, ran it all, were passionate about environmental issues, concerned about climate change, the destruction of the natural environment. And they presented in public. They won funding by going into these sort of competitions where you present, you pitch your idea to get funding and sponsorship. They were pitching in adult forums and winning and getting the funding. So they would, the skills they developed. I saw a young lady who was 8 years old, very, very shy, public speaking, and I could relate to that because I'm a bit like that too. She was asked to stand up and tell us what her passion was. And the first time she stood up on this chair and she just cried, and I thought, oh no, what have we done? But over a period of time, she learned, got more confident, did more research, got confident about her content, and then she started pitching at these events. And she's ended up actually teaching children at schools about sustainable development goals in a language that's suitable for children. And she's written a book and published a book on it. She's now 12, I think, but it's not many children of 12 have attained those sort of skills. But I think we underestimate younger children. I think we sort of think, oh, we've got to do everything for them because they're young. But in fact, half the time, I think us adults need to just get out of the way and they will work out how to do it for themselves. But of course, when you're talking about formal education, people are expected to teach a curriculum. Children are expected to learn certain subjects, pass exams, they're graded, and so on. So not quite so easily to give them that freedom, but I still think in a progressive school, you could allow the children to design their own curriculum to a certain extent.
Yeah. My follow-up question is like obviously in the case of the Philippines, which is my concern, and we have educators who are listening here joining us today. There's obviously this pressure, and rightly so, I believe, to to ensure that our learners, our young learners in particular, are reaching are learning basic minimum skills. I mean, reading, comprehension,
Yeah.
math, obviously. So there's no question there.
Yeah.
But the problem is, sometimes the recommendation tends to be, okay, so let's cut out physical education. Let's cut out extracurricular like club. And the two things that I took away, I mean, as a student also of learning, I know that you tend to listen and you tend to hear what you want to hear. So some of the things that you said resonate with me deeply is how you learn leadership skills in sports. I've always been a proponent of that. They don't even realize it, but they're learning, and not just leadership, cooperation, discipline, all
Yeah.
that. I'm such a proponent of sports. But then also, let me also include other club organizations. You also learn how to work with others, to make a plan, to have a project, to go through step 1 to step 10. And sadly, these are activities that you will hear people say, let's cut that out. Let's cut
Yeah.
that out because they don't need that right now. Let's let them focus on, the usual reading. And sadly, we all know that I don't know if we all know, but the reality there is that a lot of times these kids just don't have are not connecting with their teachers. A lot of them come from disadvantaged families, so they might not have the home environment that allows them to continue learning after school, or gives an environment where they're comfortable and having fun, lying down and reading a book and blah blah blah. So we all know that there are these limitations, but sadly, one of the quick solutions is that, like, take out this club, let's take out this activity. So can you share a little bit more on that, because I feel so strongly about that is not the approach.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. And in terms of cutting things out of the curriculum, in Australia, we tend to cut the arts out. So the arts are always under pressure. And particularly as you've got big businesses coming in wanting children to learn ICT skills at a young age. And it's a valid request, really. It's a valid concern. But also then my daughter is a teacher, by the way. You get to the end of the school year and the teachers are burnt out. The students have had that much material given to them. The curriculum's already, I think, overfull to a certain extent. So I don't think we can afford to be cutting things out per se. And I think with those children, as you say, who are in disadvantaged areas, they need those extracurricular activities more than ever. I would think there might be a different way, and I haven't thought this through, but I'm just thinking out loud now. There might be a different way of organising all of these things that we would like our children to learn, so that our children are not bombarded by a lot of material and our teachers are not burned out by the end of the year. We tended to follow, I think, I think in Australia, in all of our education jurisdictions, I think everybody's got a fixed curriculum. With extras, a bit here and a bit there. So the extras part is quite inconsistent. I'm not sure I have an answer for that, but I think that's an area where you could use something like the strategic foresight process and futures thinking to explore the possibilities. What do we really need? What are disadvantaged children really going to need? And clearly, if that disadvantage is not going to continue into their adult life and their work life, digital skills is critical. And you don't want them to use the socializing skills. So maybe those after school activities could become much more like social clubs and we could ask the kids to run them themselves. But again, I would say use something like futures thinking, future studies to explore the options and to explore the scenarios. If we change this in the curriculum, if we change that, if we did this differently, what would the future impact be on those students and their capabilities?
Yes, I'd like to call in my team and our secretariat and actually all our other local experts who are also here to take note of that, because that's something I'd like to develop further, like maybe even have another hearing on that.
Yes.
Earlier, Dr. Bishop also mentioned about how parents have been left out of the equation. So when you mentioned that, Dr. Anita, my thought was like, well, then maybe that's where parent groups, maybe not, it's not
Yes.
always possible for one parent to do the same thing another parent is doing, because there are parents who are stay at home. There are parents who are stay at home but have 8 kids in the
Yeah.
Philippines. And
Yeah.
then there are single parent homes and so on and so forth. So for me, it's a community of parents or
Yes.
parental figures who could
Yes.
actually take on this role. Because again, I also believe that the teachers are overworked as well, who could take on this role as facilitators of these after school activities. And again, I take away from my personal experience in sports. I know that what is done in when the kids are younger, every sport expert I've spoken to says expose them to as many sports as possible. And I think Australia does the same. I mean, not so many, but I mean, you know, even if your dream is for your kid to be a tennis professional or a soccer
Yeah.
professional, let them try other things. You never know where they excel. Plus, it allows them to develop all these other skills that will help them with that particular sport that they do choose later on. And that's why you also have season, you know. So in the younger years, these kids could be in basketball season at this time of the year, and then
Yeah.
at the other time of the year they're a swimmer or they're a football player or whatever else. And I'm
Yep.
thinking, and again, I'm not the educator, but I'm thinking, as you said, if we do this from a futurist approach, you know, what can we learn about how kids learn and divide this up? So you're not going to force them all to learn art and music and 3 sports this
Yeah.
week,
Yeah.
but it might be equally spread out that they're learning it 3 months art and then take a break, and obviously if they love it, try to
Yeah.
still support that after school, but then expose them to something else. So that's my challenge for the educators out there listening to us, and to my team. That's kind of the output that I would like to have. And if you have any other thoughts, as you said, Dr. Anita, you're just like, we're thinking about this, but I'd love to hear more about this, because I'm sure the whole world would I mean, I'm sure there are there would be progressive schools who thought this through, you know,
Yeah.
that
So,
kids don't need 5 days of this. They'll equally progress and be equally stimulated with 2 days of this, shift to 2 days. So I'd love to be able to explore that for our public school systems as well.
that would be great. And just one last point, as you've talked about involving parents, we have, in our state anyway, we have parents and citizens groups which are attached to the schools, and it tends to be more active in the primary schools at the younger years. But the education department oversees these groups, I believe provides some sort of basic training and a bit of support, but otherwise the parents and citizens groups deal directly with the school, the principal and the staff, and they design and develop programs or meetings or whatever they feel that school needs that they can contribute, and also engage the broader community in some of these things. So bringing in an expert mechanic or something,
Right.
to talk to kids about what that job's like in the future, and let them have a play with some bits of machinery, that sort of thing. So I mean, there's lots of things a parents and citizens group could do.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's that easy. It's not hard to form them, but again, as you mentioned earlier, it's hard for the same parent to keep doing the same thing. And with the
Yes.
parents and citizens group, there is a tendency for, I guess, the wealthier, better educated parents will usually step up.
Have more time.
They have more time, yes, and they have the skills, and they're not intimidated by what might be involved in doing that. But yes, fairly straightforward to set up. And if you would like me to send you some information, I'm sure I can pretty well find it online fairly quickly and send that through by email to your office.
Thank you. I would. I do know all across the country we have parent associations, and they tend to be very active.
Oh, good.
Obviously, it depends on the area, and you know, I'm sure one year is better than another depending on the parents involved. But I do know that they get involved in like feeding programs, in
Yeah.
field trips, sometimes in gardening. So there's a lot of potential there.
Yeah.
And one thing I'd like to explore with any recommendations you also have, but anything also that anyone here present in the hearing can share is could we possibly institutionalize this? And all I mean by that really is to really encourage these parents. And I've always felt like we have a wealth of experience with the retired professionals, these
Yeah.
teachers who've retired. I mean, 60 is not old by our standards. That's another thing that future thinking wise, the 60s of 40 years ago is not the 60-year-old person now. And I
No.
truly believe that they have so much to share. So yeah, so these are areas I'd like to explore.
Well,
Thank
thank you very much. As a 64-year-old, I appreciate that comment.
Well, you don't look 64, so
Well, thank you.
thank you so much, Dr. Anita. I hope we'll have more opportunity to interact with you. I really appreciated the time that you gave us, and I hope you stay safe, that the storm calms down.
So do I, but thank you very much. Thank you. It's been a pleasure to join you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.
All right, so let's now proceed. I'd like to now call on Dr. Ethel Agnes Pascua Valenzuela. She is the Director for Southeast Asian Ministers of Education Organization, SIMYO, based in Thailand. SIMYO Secretariat serves as the executive and technical arm of the SIMYO Council, which consists of the education ministers in the region. And so, Dr. Ethel, we're very excited to have you, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Honorable Senator Pia Cayetano, our esteemed members of the committee, our designated panel of experts for this afternoon, members of this very valuable Committee on Sustainable Development Goals, Innovation and Futures Thinking. Well, I'm very pleased to join you from Thailand. Magandang hapon and sawadee ka.
Magandang hapon.
So, well, I remember when we are still crafting the K-12, I was instrumental in comparing the educational systems in all member countries of Southeast Asia for us to develop the K-12 system, the subjects, the number of hours, and even the K-12 toolkit. And now I'm really doubly happy that we are here again in this situation where we're charting the future. As a member of the SDG Steering Committee, the Global Steering Committee of Sustainable Development Goals, we also have the opportunity to look at the projection on the futures, thinking and the future of education, where we had a projection for 2050. What will it be? Let me just work on what was assigned to me to present this afternoon. I will just upload my PowerPoint. And I would like to thank Professor Alex Brillantes of CHED for inviting me to share my thoughts, insights, and perspectives on the future of work and skills and the future of education. I will be touching on the Philippines as well as the broader member countries of CIMEO. So where we have heard from our previous speaker on what will the future be, and as we know, the future depends on what we do today. That's why you're very instrumental in charting the direction of the future learners, our teachers, our lifelong learners. So whatever we do today will depend on what we are investing right now. So it was said that by 2028, 10.2% of the ASEAN 6, Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, Singapore, Thailand, Vietnam, will be displaced by automation. So, and the heavily displaced will be Indonesia and Vietnam will be losing some work and because of automation, and heavily on agriculture, which accounts for 13.7 and 17% of the GDP. So you can see the Philippines about 4.5 was projected for displacement in terms of our full-time workers. Also, in terms of the technologically driven displacement in these countries, it will occur in agriculture sector, where they have already projected different areas of displacement from agriculture to mining, manufacturing, electricity, water supply, transport, etc. So this will give us more or less kind of information on where to invest in terms of education, in terms of skills training. We cannot also move forward without looking at where we are today. In terms of global competitiveness index, in 2019, we see where we are in the Philippines and our rank in global competitiveness index. We can also see where we are in terms of global innovation and as well as human development index. But we would like to ponder, how do we be up there, or what are the skills do we need? If you look at the studies in the past on what are the required skills in 1986, for example, they would look into the character, willingness to learn, the age requirement, bachelor's degree, or proficiency in English communication, and of proximity to where the hotel or the employment is. But today, all these have been changed. They look at more of the 21st century skills of being able to have positive attitudes, to work with a team, at the same time, be able to work independently. So also proficiency in IT, because you have to work in this situation where IT is already a reality and a tool for you to work. And sometimes the 4-year university degree is required with 2 years of experience. So I remember when we negotiated for ATech engineers, they also require, university degree plus 7 years of work experience, that much. So what we learned from this situation is that, 65% of students nowadays will work in jobs that do not exist yet because of automation. This was projected already by Institute for the Future and Dell Technologies. And what kind of skills do we need? We need programmers, data scientists, software developers. These are what was predicted by the World Education Forum. There's also increasing need for cognitive, social, and behavioral skills. So it's not just what you know, but also how you relate with others and how you master to work in pressure cooker conditions for different establishments. How do we acquire those skills then? Well, one is educational system. Well, our system should prepare us for all these competencies. That's why we introduce competency-based instruction, competency-based learning, and we also need to revisit the skills formation. So skills every worker will need in 2030. We're also in the same wave as you, that we are also doing our Senior Strategic Plan 2021 to 2030. So we conducted a lot of brainstorming, inviting all the thought leaders from Southeast Asia, think tanks, to tell us what would be needed in the new 2030 decade. So one of the things we talked about during the discussions was the basic requirement on digital literacy. It's not just being able to use the smartphones or navigating social media, but also other skills that are increasingly important, like coding skills, computational and logical thinking, and of course, what we put in our present curriculum, K to 12, 21st century skills, critical thinking, communication, collaboration, and creativity. So these are all very important inputs to the new graduates or the new learners that we have. But more than that, we also need to do away with memorization. Of course, when we were students, we would memorize a lot of facts. But increasingly today, we should use project-based learning and collaborative group work, which I see in many countries in Southeast Asia, like Singapore or Malaysia. They do a lot on this. So I think in the past, I was asked by UNESCO to do the employability of Filipino graduates, 2 studies. And there I tried to gather information from employers from the Philippines and determine what would be the requirements of employees in terms of new skills. So they increasingly require complex problem-solving skills, critical thinking, creativity, coordinating with others, good judgment and decision-making, cognitive flexibility, and most importantly, adaptability. So in that study, I remember that the Filipinos would land a job from 6 to 9 months as well. It takes a longer time to land a job. And no, before they require graduates of 4 universities, but now it's like more or less looking at the skills of the applicants. Well, as a member of the SDG Steering Committee for UNESCO, we are now reviewing all the papers on the futures thinking and futures of education. There is an international commission doing this work, but as a member, we try to review the papers submitted and we focus on the vision on education through the lens of international and regional stakeholders. And well, because of COVID-19, the work was a bit, focused on the COVID-19 response. So there are only three priorities as of now in terms of moving together in this scenario or decade. So the basics for discussions are on the following. First, on inclusion and equity dimension. You will see in most of the UN documents for futures of education that the biggest consideration is to leave no single learner behind. So inclusion in and throughout education system is being considered. It is the guiding principle of any response because it's brought by COVID when everybody should be able to learn in different ways by flexible learning or different modalities. Especially focusing on the most vulnerable, marginalized, we should be able to reach to them to be able to have this education and not the lost decade. We should ensure that learning continues for all, including all those out-of-school children who are actually in current crisis, but they have also been affected by COVID-19. So this is the first consideration of the Futures of Education Committee. The second one is on teacher support and training. So with the COVID-19 pandemic, we really saw the gaps in terms of proficiency of teachers to handle flexible learning classes. So teachers, they increasingly, needed to adapt to distance delivery modes, and many of them are unprepared, right? So because we are taught as a teacher like me for 30 years, we are used to face-to-face instructions, and then we normally use little of technology, except that, in my last 5 years at the University of the Philippines College of Education, we use Facebook for our classes, we use technology and everything. But not all teachers have this kind of training. So we need to invest on professional development of teachers and of course to support them to ensure that they will be able to maximize technology for teaching students wherever they are, whether they are in the remote areas or they are disconnected by technology. The committee also calls for all governments to prioritize teacher safety, their health and well-being during this crisis. And this is a world phenomenon that many of the teachers would be increasingly displaced. Their employment should be secured and their wages as well. And that, as a global community, we should support professional development of teachers and equip them with proper tools and know-how to deliver learning in this time of crisis. So the UNESCO Education Agenda, the third pillar of this response, is also on investment in education. So number one is access, and number two is teachers, and number three is on political commitment and investment in education to be able to have this recovery phase. We are now in the new normal. As you see here in Thailand, we are 100% back to work and schools will be reopening. But we should also think about increasing investment in education through and after the crisis, because we know that this is very much needed in terms of meeting the requirements for technology, in terms of meeting the requirements for teacher training. So different bilateral and multilateral institutions have committed funds for supporting education during this pandemic. So in UNESCO system, there is this global coalition for COVID-19 response, which Simeo is a member. And if you don't have money, we can share our resources, our open educational resources. We can share our capacity for training teachers and the like. So futures of education. In the design of futures of education for UNESCO, they're targeting that they will be coming up with a book on learning to become. That's the future of education. That the education will enrich the person, and this is really the goal of the International Commission. However, the report is not yet complete, but I will be sharing with you some of the information that will be relevant to your work as you design the future of the Philippine education and reaching Sustainable Development Goal number 4. And so it will be just like this, lively perspectives coming from different, sources of information, engaging in lively dialogue. But we also did some surveys on Education 2050. So there are only few questions asked. So what do you think education will be in 2050? What are the important requirements for 2050 and technology and teacher training? So in this reflection, the biggest input would be on equity and inclusion and relevance of education at this time. So the skills requirement, STEM education, and to STEAM, which A stood for arts. So making sure that the learners will be holistically developed to include the arts itself. So the aftermath of C-19 crisis. So as we all know, the crisis was there to challenge us because the Southeast Asian member countries are still transitioning from the traditional to digital technology. In fact, last year in the ministerial meeting in KL, we tried to present the artificial intelligence. We got experts on artificial intelligence to talk about the use of artificial intelligence in education. And we are still starting. We have the ministerial statement and we are on our way. However, this COVID crisis forced us to already use technology and artificial intelligence. So it is really very challenging at this time for our member countries. So we have gathered information from all members of CIMEO in terms of COVID-19 response, and you will hear that tomorrow during the ministerial meeting, but let me just share some areas for policy making. So for example, is the sector that we need to really strengthen. And, confinement and social digital divide, because now also the security, evidence, and monitoring the crisis confronted us with so many issues on security, and artificial intelligence and ICT. This is a continuing struggle, but what does it mean for education? So our futures contain all the hope we have to transmit to future generation. We don't want it to be a lost generation, but we want them to really be renewed and transformed and prepared in a manner that they can manage the future and to be confident in the opportunities provided by the world. So midterm and long-term perspective. So does it mean for education as well? So it is also, in CIMEO, we use foresight study in looking at our 2030 agenda. But we also need to look at what is actually needed in the region. We have been discussing with, for example, Malaysia yesterday, that we need to increasingly focus our attention on inclusion and the unreached children, the marginalized children, those with disabilities. We have to make sure that learning is for everyone, that learning continues. And that we should also think of teachers as co-creators of policies, students, the youth, who should be co-creators of policies, who should help us redesign the future, and also the accountability mechanisms when we already completed this work. So tomorrow at 9:30 to 11:30, we will be listening to our ministers, all of them, CIMEO ministers from Malaysia, Singapore, Brunei, Cambodia, Indonesia, Laos, PDR, Myanmar, the Philippines, Thailand, Timor-Leste, and Vietnam. They will be sharing with us the futures after COVID, the policies that will be enacted, what they think would be the futures of education. So I don't want to preempt their presentations, but surely I will be sharing with you some of the highlights of the futures of education from our member countries from the ministers themselves. And because most of them are actually very busy at this time, COVID is not just a health crisis or an economic crisis, it is also an education crisis. So with that, Honorable Senator, thank you for giving Simeo the chance to share our thoughts. We have a lot of things to do. We have open and online resources shared in our website that is for all member countries to be able to, make use during this crisis. And we are also training some teachers doing capacity building research for Southeast Asia. And please let us know. We will be helping you on this, getting materials or information from 11 member countries of the region so that our deliberation and decision making will be better, regional and global. Thank you so much and have a good day.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ethel. Just a quick question. Has there been a consensus, I guess this is the first Simeo meeting since COVID started, but in any case, is there some kind of consensus that you've heard about within Simeo among the leaders on how or whether COVID can actually be turned into an opportunity to fast track the transition into a more an education system that is more in line with what the future presents. So in other words, what I'm saying is, you already presented data that shows that how many years ago we already determined that X% of jobs will be lost, X% of people need to upscale, X% of 60, what did you say, 65% of jobs will be, 60% of those, 60% of jobs don't even exist yet. So the skills that they have to learn have to somewhat predict, these future skills needed. So with all of that, is there some kind of consensus that can we take advantage of this pandemic and jumpstart that process into reinventing the way we teach, we learn, so that our youth can be more prepared and more aligned with the jobs of the future? Yeah.
Yeah, since 2015, we have already adopted priority areas in education. So what the region should focus on. And the first one is early childhood care and education, making sure that all 5-year-old kids would be in school. That's number one. So all the ministers are working towards early childhood care and education. There is a classroom, there are good teachers, they have standards. That's number one priority. The second one is, making sure that we reach the unreached. So it's more of inclusive education. Ministers already agreed to work on using alternative delivery modes, using technology to reach out to the learners, especially those with difficulties and with disabilities in them. So it was already agreed that that's number two. Number three, which we are somehow a lead, is resiliency in the face of emergencies. So since then, since 2015, we are working on resilience already. The first decision of the minister is to strengthen resilience and responsiveness in times of emergencies. We did a lot of capacity building training with Simeo and Simeo centers. We have 26 Simeo centers all over Southeast Asia. But let me admit that we don't have a lot of activities and training on that. But last year, that had hosted the sharing of expertise in Bohol. The fourth one is Tibet. So they have also a consensus on promoting technical and vocational education and training. So we've been doing all mobility of Tibet students and teachers to be able to learn from one another. And we have also prioritized augmented reality, Internet of Things, and teaching the kids on current Tibet agenda. Fifth is teachers. So making teaching a priority of choice. That's also a consensus among the ministers that we need to capacitate teachers, especially on the retooling side, between teachers to make use of technology and to love teaching and making teaching a priority of choice. That's the consensus. And number 6 is, very important for the ASEAN region is harmonization of higher education. We did a lot of discussion about how do we recognize higher education in all member countries. But first, we need to harmonize our curriculum, our courses, our credits, which actually is very challenging, especially on the credit transfer. And number 7, that they have agreed as a consensus is on adopting 21st century skills. That all member countries of CIVEO, the education system, should focus on 21st century skills. So this number 7 is actually adopted already in most countries, whether it is in the curriculum, whether it's in the capacity building or the skills requirement for graduates. So these are the 7 areas that they have done. But tomorrow is another day. Due to COVID, there may be a different collaboration that will be coming in terms of their commitments. But I'm pretty sure that listening to the different countries and looking at the submissions, we did a survey on their COVID-19 response. I'm already predicting that discussion will be more of, reaching the unreached and digital technology, making use of other modes of learning like educational television used in Cambodia to reach teachers who do not have Wi-Fi, or making use of radio broadcasting in some countries. So maybe the discussion and the agreement will be more of technology-assisted instruction, which will be the next focus for the next planning period. So ministers usually meet every 2 years for us. So next year is our meeting year. So it will be a different meeting. And this will be our first time to have the virtual meeting of ministers, by the way, and 100% attendance. So we have already adopted the priorities in education, which we can also share with you. And also, at this time of 2030 agenda of CIVEO, we have also talked about the science agenda and the culture agenda, because CIVEO is also education, culture, and science. So, which we will be happy sharing with you all of this information on all the educational systems in Southeast Asia for your deliberation and discussion. Honorable Senator.
Thank you so much. We look forward to that, the summary that I'll try to listen in to it tomorrow also, but if you can also give us a summary. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
So let me now proceed with our next set of speakers, just so that you can get ready. Dr. Cornelia Cao, followed by Maria Regaile Olarte, and the third would be Dr. Eva Maria Cutwinco de la Paz. So Dr. Cao, hello, the floor is yours. Dr. Cao is a professor and director, Institute of Biology, College of Science, University of the Philippines, Diliman. Head plant genetic and how do I say this? Sayo or Kayo?
Cyanobacteria.
Okay. Cyanobacteria Biotechnology Lab. Welcome, ma'am.
Good afternoon, Honorable Senator Pia Cayetano, Senator Amy Marcos, and other members of the committee, to the other panel members, and everyone watching. I will try to share some slides to give highlight to what I have prepared. Can you see my slides now? Okay, so I will be highlighting certain points on the paper that I have submitted to the Honorable Senator. First, my title is on the future of jobs and futures thinking in the time of COVID-19 and beyond. We all know already that the COVID-19 pandemic has changed how people conduct their daily lives. In the Philippines, it has affected schools, livelihoods, and even our home life. The COVID-19 pandemic, even if resolved by the discovery of vaccines or treatment, will not be the last of our health crisis. There will be new viruses or pathogens that will evolve, leading to new and or re-emerging diseases in our future. Therefore, we need to prepare not only for our actions in the time of COVID-19 pandemic, but also beyond it. So how do we prepare our students in the light of COVID-19 and the subsequent restricted work environments due to the need for quarantine and isolation measures? So much has already been discussed on the new modes of delivery for teaching and learning. Can I be heard adequately? Can I proceed? Okay, so this presentation deals with emergent jobs and the strategies needed in order to enable our students to cope with the changing work landscape. The latest International Labour Organization data on the labor market impact of COVID-19 pandemic reveals the devastating effect on workers in the informal economy and on hundreds of millions of enterprises worldwide. As a consequence of business or economy slowing down, job competition and security will continue to be precarious. The challenge, therefore, is to create new jobs or new mandates where our students and or graduates can come in. Since long-distance supply chains may not be working during a pandemic, businesses or organizations may have to look for more local suppliers and customer relationships. In general, there is a need to develop new approaches to how and where people work. The key word here is adaptation, and our educational system must provide the environment so that our graduates can adapt, whether it involves science and technology, business, or culture and the arts. Leaders in all sectors will have to focus their efforts from survival to adaptation. Yes, we must survive this pandemic, but for the long term, we need to adapt to the new normal as well as its future iterations. So, what do I think would be the future of jobs? Even before the pandemic, many companies and organizations had already shifted to the mobile way of working. Given the accessibility of communication and information technology, people can work anywhere and anytime without transportation issues. The homes will be structured both as an abode and a workplace, and even school space for remote learning. 3 months and counting of community quarantine has shown that there is and will be a reliance on the online mode as the safest means of conducting learning and work. To this, the first order of things would be for the government to establish the necessary infrastructure to provide and improve internet connectivity for every Filipino. To make internet service free would actually make it accessible to every student and worker. The Secretary General of the United Nations, in his report on the progress of SDG 4 in 2019, even before the pandemic, noted that in many developing countries, there is still a lack of basic infrastructure and facilities, such as electricity, drinking water, the internet, and computers. There is therefore an urgent need for our government to provide for these basic necessities and strengthen nationwide infrastructure in IT hardware and software, as well as cyber security measures. Still on future of jobs, automation will be used by different sectors in production, manufacturing, transport, healthcare, and others, not only to reduce the risk of human exposure to COVID and similar future infections, but likewise, it allows faster and more efficient delivery of services. This, however, does not mean removing humans from the labor force, since the driving force for the development of automated machines or robots or even artificial intelligence will still be the human mind. Therefore, the education sector should redesign or reinvent our curricula to adapt to this working landscape. So what would be support In the interest, I have summarized them into critical thinking necessary for solving. Gifted with innate talent. Even with the meager resources available to many students in the country, given the opportunity, we find our students able to adapt and compete in universities abroad for higher studies. The presence of a Filipino in any part of the world performing various jobs attests to the varied skills that we are capable of learning. Number 2, creativity necessary for innovations. Innovations are necessary in healthcare, from preventive medicine to diagnostics to therapeutics, in agriculture and fisheries, from the farm to the market, in energy resources and utilization, in accessible and efficient mass transportation, and in information and communication technology. The creativity necessary for these larger goals can and should be instilled and cultivated from childhood within a well-developed and well-implemented education program. I think that has also been emphasized by Dr. Anita, the need for early childhood learning. Number 3, interdisciplinary knowledge necessary for collaboration in different fields. Effective and inclusive problem solving in education and in work environments requires a holistic approach, which gives importance not only to the hard sciences, but also to cultural, social, and historical knowledge. The value of collaboration cannot be overstated because solutions and innovations in all fields benefit from access to a broad range of perspectives and expertise. So what is the end point for the future? At the end of it all, what we should establish should be an enabling environment so that our graduates will be creators of technology instead of simply being buyers of technology. In this way, we will not be at the mercy of foreign technologies, which are often expensive and inaccessible to many. For this, I will make my second pitch to the government, which is to support the development of science and scientists in the Philippines. Graduates of science programs have job options limited to teaching, research of short-term projects, and the handful of consumer goods companies. This contrasts to how scientists overseas are often employed in biotech or pharmaceutical companies and conduct long-term research programs. Science in the Philippines has not been given the support for it to be a thriving career. For example, we have no local companies producing chemicals and equipment necessary for our laboratory activities and for use in hospitals. Now more than ever, during this pandemic, we have come to realize the gravity. Is my slide still on?
Yeah, but it went back. There you go.
Okay, so I think I'm on the last slide, okay, and I'm emphasizing the need for having a strong healthcare system. I think I left there. And the challenges we face with regards to testing and treatment for COVID-19 shines a light on the need for government to consistently invest in laboratories and training of capable scientists. We need and can develop our own technologies, providing jobs for our equally competent science graduates, and that they may be in the service of our people. These technologies can range from locally produced respirators, laboratory equipment for diagnostics, mobile devices and apps for forecasting and information dissemination, as well as medicines and vaccines, not only for COVID-19, but for other diseases. The Philippines is a biodiversity hotspot. We have unique endemic species of plants, animals, and even microorganisms that can be potential sources of drugs and other pharmaceutical products, and we should be able to harness them in sustainable ways. Lastly, what will be the role of the teacher or the educational system? Teachers should be trained and regarded not only as the source of learning, but also the facilitator of learning. In an age where learning materials abound in the form of textbooks and online resources, It is the role of the teacher to guide their students to the correct and useful information. I think this has also been emphasized in the previous talks. The teacher should also be capable to help students process vast information, not simply as stored information, but the information should be translated into applications that will be beneficial to Philippine society. That would be all. Thank you for this opportunity to give my thoughts to the committee. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. What I'd like you to help us with here in the work of the committee is if you could give us a wish list of what government can actually do to address to specifically address your recommendation. So when you said like to create that environment where the scientists can thrive, no? I mean, to a large extent, not totally. Some will argue that that's private sector driven, but then again, government can have a big say in creating that environment. No? So if you can help us there, because whether it's by way of law or just by way of awareness, pushing it with a budget, like if you say like with a grant of X amount, especially now in the time of COVID, it opened our eyes. I mean, even just things like PPEs. I mean, that's a garment industry, and Senator Aimee is very familiar with this because of our sector in the garment business who's shifting to the production of PPE. So, napakasimple nun. That's not even high technology.
Yes.
You can, give us a wish list and even pinpoint. Like if you were to ask me, I would have no idea as to whether the technology for building a simplified respirator versus developing a vaccine, world of a difference ba yung investment doon, or yung one is that's not going to cost us a lot, but like do we put up laboratories, do we invest in a few labs where people can collaborate, they can go in and out on their own and just use the facilities. Tell me what that wish list is, kasi that's our job to explore that and, to make those recommendations. That is what the committee does. We'll make those recommendations. You're on mute.
Okay. Can you hear me now, ma'am? Yes. So I will give the details of my wish list, but probably I'll emphasize on one point that I have mentioned, and this would be starting our learners early. Science, I believe, should be taught at the early grades. And what I mean by being taught, as emphasized also by Dr. Bishop and Dr. Anita earlier, would not be the rote kind of learning that we use, where we ask students to memorize so many terms. It would be, actually, what is science? We do science. We don't have to be scientists to do science. It's a logical way, an organized way of living. And by simply engaging our students, our young students, to be inquisitive, to ask questions. That's the first step of science, to ask a question and try to find answers to those questions. This can be started at the elementary grades, where science is taught using the exploratory kind of approach, and this will not need a lot of budget at the early grades. Teachers would just need to bring students outside, explore nature, for instance. Well, of course, now in the lockdown during quarantine, they can ask questions that they can say, or can be related, let's say, to what they find in the home, what they find useful, what would be the problems that they have encountered in the home. I mean, these are simple approaches that we can have, and probably, as I have said, trying to redesign our curricula so that the science curriculum would be more of exploratory instead of just being rote learning. I know that many young people are actually prejudiced against the sciences because they think it's very boring, it's all a lot of memorization and all, but we can make science exciting. And that would be in terms of the educational support that I had mentioned. Of course, as we go upwards, and now that we are implementing the K-12 program, then we probably would need support in terms of funding our laboratories. My experience at the tertiary level in UP would be to have, high school students coming to us, trying to ask us for help so that they can do their science research projects, because they do not have laboratory equipment in their schools, maybe for the science schools or for the private schools, but the public schools are in dire need of such support. And then, of course, as we go to the college level, the same thing. Many schools in the provinces, as I've said, lack internet connectivity. So how do we do online learning? How do we do remote learning if our students do not have access to the internet and so on? So these are just some emphasis on what I have mentioned earlier. And I will just be giving the details of the rest of our wish list, if you may allow.
Thank you very much. One last slide on how to make science exciting for young children. My children all went to Montessori school, so as early as they call their CASA years, which is really preschool, 3 years old, 4 years old, 5 years old, and I'm a daughter of a teacher. They're already exposed to science, so I understand and fully support what you're saying. And what I'd like to, and you don't need to answer because I'll pursue the other. I'll give time to the other resource persons to speak. But what I'd like to talk to you maybe on the side, or if there are other resource persons here who know. Like, I know there are local publications, and even online you can just go and science for 5 years old. It's out there. So how do we make this accessible also to parents? Like, if you ask me, those in the province, although on the one hand it is a disadvantage if they are in hard to reach areas, but if they are given this basic equipment, even if the parents do not have a college education, I'm perpetually amazed also by the information I learned through my own kids, just because I don't remember it being taught, or maybe it wasn't taught to me that way. So like nagluluto, 'di ba, yung apoy doon. I mean, ano ba yung concept ng fire? And and then environmentally, the smoke that is produced, that's bad for you. That's also science. That's health, etc., etc. So I totally understand. And I need to take it to the next step, no? How do we work with DepEd and our earlier speaker? We talked about parents being more involved, so that this information, which is already out there, can be delivered easily to busy parents or parents with no background, and they can make it part of the day-to-day life of these kids. Because I agree with you, it's actually one of the easiest things to teach, probably even easier than math, no? Because the concepts are in day-to-day life, di ba? Like kuryente, no? I mean, what is electricity? And so on and so forth. So thank you for bringing that up, and I would love to work on with you on that further. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
So let's call on now Ms. Abigail Olarte, and then to be followed by Dr. Eva de la Paz. So Ms. Olarte is an education program supervisor, school governance and operation division of School of Multimedia. By the way, Dr. Cao and Ms. Olarte, and later on Dr. Eva, they are all our Metrobank awardees. So we're really making a point of bringing our local talents to our hearing so that they can also share their research and experience with all of us. Thank you. And I hope before I let Ms. Olarte continue, we also have with us representatives from our different agencies, and I hope that you also use this as a tool, to connect with each other so that we can all continue to learn from this. Thank you. So, Ms. Olarte, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. Good afternoon to everyone. I'm Maria Rigel A. Olarte from DepEd Muntinlupa, and I'll be presenting to you Invention-driven Instructional Design and Innovation Transfer, or IDIT, for Sustainable Future of Jobs. I think my slide is frozen.
You're on the first slide pa lang.
To stop sharing first, Madam, and I will try to share it again because my slide. I would like to know if you're hearing me well so that I can
Hear you.
Okay, thank you so much. Worldwide, this COVID-19 pandemic has been a disruptive agent for all of us, and it has caught us off guard and has significantly reshaped the way we think and interact. And in the midst of this pressing crisis, we have one silver lining, which is the people are still capable of thriving because of the innate inventiveness and innovativeness of mankind. And it's quite related to what Dr. Han has mentioned a while ago. We Filipinos are known to be naturally talented and creative. That's why we excel in almost every kind of field. However, according to the Philippine News Agency in 2018, the country is actually left behind when it comes to inventions and innovations, both of which can considerably propel the Philippines towards economic development and prosperity. While we Filipinos are actually good at generating ideas, transforming such creative ideas into concrete designs for practical application sometimes becomes a challenge due to several factors, maybe socioeconomic factors, or maybe has something to do with our educational landscape. Simply put, creativity is thinking of new things, invention is making new things, and innovation is improving things differently. With the advent of AI technology and this fourth industrial revolution, there is an imminent concern that it might replace humans in almost any field. However, it is important to note that creativity is a fundamental aspect of human intelligence, but it is a limitation of artificial intelligence. While AI makes decisions based on algorithms, we humans by nature can creatively imagine and come up with new ideas to solve new problems. Thus, creativity, inventiveness, and innovativeness are the unique features that can still keep humans a step ahead than artificial intelligence in this 21st century. Let me show you here the table from the Future of Jobs report of the World Economic Forum, and it lists the top 10 skills in 2015 and 2020. It shows that from the top 10 spot in 2015, creativity becomes one of the top 3 skills that workers need to thrive in 2020. And it is also remarkable that the 3 high-ranking skills, which are the complex problem solving, I think it was mentioned a while ago by our third speaker, complex problem solving skills, critical thinking skills, and creativity skills. These top 3 skills are the primary skills that are actually fostered in the invention-driven instruction. Therefore, the role of education is very crucial in shaping sustainable future for a productive workforce. And basic education must provide fertile ground for creativity, and that creativity will fuel inventions and innovations. And through the I did it, or the invention-driven instructional design and innovation transfer, learners are given the opportunity to come up with simple solutions to problems at hand, providing a practical and progressive learning experience for our learners. Of course, with their ingenuity and resourcefulness. I am showing here to you the features of the invention-driven instructional design and innovation transfer, and it is based on sound learning theories, strategies, and processes, making our learners future-proof and resilient individuals. It actually provides the learners avenue to become creators, builders, designers, producers, and makers. And it is important to start invention-driven instruction at an early age. And it has been mentioned a while ago, really at an early age, rather than simply wait until the learners are already in high school or college. And I think we all agree on that. Since education is not just a quick transfer of knowledge or information, but it is a gradual and iterative process, a long-term exposure to such kind of instruction will actually allow our learners to master the 21st century skills. And using creativity in problem solving, like any other skill, needs to be practiced, it needs to be exercised and built upon itself to become an established lifelong skill that can bring the learners into their future career paths. Such paradigm does not focus only on producing inventors, scientists, engineers, and other technical professionals, but we actually prepare and foster skillful workforce and entrepreneurs across industries, because people actually think when they hear inventions, they just think of the scientific or highly technical uh, inventions. But in fact, there is what we call the social political inventions and even humanistic or cultural inventions. And by exposing them to such kind of instruction, it also prepares our learners for careers and work areas that have not yet been imagined in the context of continuing change. I think it was also mentioned a while ago. And now I'll be sharing to you the impact of the invention-driven instruction. It is this is in the school where I used to teach. It is in Muntinlupa National High School, and they've been practicing invention-driven instruction. Students are actually engaged in the learning process since they're not only recipients, passive recipients of information. The results, they were able to achieve the best learning outcomes that adequately prepared them for life and work. And they became successful professionals, entrepreneurs, and leaders in their own rights because the door to a world of possibilities was open for them at their young age. And here in this slide, students became part of achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. And with their developed knowledge, skills, and attitudes, they became or they become globally competitive. They were able to transfer their innovation not only here in the Philippines, but also to the world by sharing their work, and winning in various competitions here and abroad. Some of our students were actually able to patent their own inventions and innovations with the assistance, of course, of the OST. And of course, following our lead as their teachers, because I myself have already patented inventions along with my colleague in the academy. And lastly, just last year, the Philippines, through Muntinlupa National High School, was conferred with the Zayed Sustainability Prize. And it's in the presence of global, I am that one in Fushaping, glory to God. And I was privileged to receive the award in the presence of global leaders, and that was during the Abu Dhabi Sustainability Week. In conclusion, we must therefore allow students to learn how to learn through a variety of methods by discovery and be able to adapt in future working situations. And of course, we need to build their 21st century skills. And from a young age, invention education must already be introduced to bring a way for our learners to leverage their other skills and to use them to learn and practice problem solving, which becomes a lifelong skill that can carry them in their future careers. And sustainable future jobs need people who are able to ensure constant flow of new ideas and capable of implementing them concretely. So it's not just the thinking of ideas, but also the implementation of the ideas. And lastly, through the invention-driven instructional design and innovation transfer, students are gradually prepared for all kinds of work, life experiences, and social challenges. These are the references. Thank you so much for listening. God bless us all.
Thank you very much. I just have a quick question. Is this concept of invention-driven, I did it is your acronym? Is that your concept? Is that a concept you developed?
Yeah, this is an original. Yes, it's developed originally by me, but it is actually based on sound
Yes, of course, of
principles
course.
that I have just showed you a while ago. That's why it's a proposal, but it's already research based, and
Yes,
I
obviously.
also submitted it to UNESCO. And in 2018, I think through Muntinlupa National High School, we were the official candidate to ESD prize. So
Do you have this by way of like a manual that you share with teachers, or how is this actually? I mean, I understand the concept. I totally understand it. That's why I wasn't sure if it was your own original,
yes, along with yes, Madam Chair, along with my other colleague in Muntinlupa National High School. Just last year, I was still teaching there, but just this year I got promoted to the division, and we created a website for this to
Okay.
actually show how it goes and what are the features, and what students and even the other stakeholders need to know how they could participate in such
Okay.
endeavor.
So, but is it addressed to educators? Is it meant for educators? I asked that question because about 2 years ago I purchased a it's just a manual. It's a parent's manual on empowering your kids, no, on critical thinking, on basically very similar concepts, but it was for parents. That's why I asked, because in our whole talk, aside from empowering the teachers, no, to shift to this kind of teaching and sharing, to develop that kind of curiosity, and allow the students to explore and learn on their own. I think we need to also equip the parents. So I was asking if it's also, we have material prepared for parents with no education background. I consider myself blessed and lucky kasi nga my mom is a teacher. So it's not that difficult for me to grasp the concepts, plus the fact that I'm very interested kasi ever since.
Yes, that's a good idea. Maybe to create a primer
Yeah.
for the parents, because this actually has been already introduced to teachers, but no activities yet to disseminate the information to parents apart from the website that we have just put up.
Sige, I'll visit the website, and then I'll also tell my staff to share with you the link of the material that I purchased online. Kasi ganun yung concept na naisip ko.
Wow.
I'd like to support you on that, no?
Thank you so much.
Taga Muntinlupa din naman ako. So I want to help your endeavors. And of course, it's not limited naman to Muntinlupa, but I'm very proud of your output as well.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. God bless po.
Thank you. Okay, so let's call on Dr. Eva Maria Putwinco de la Paz. She is a full professor and executive director, National Institute of Health, University of the Philippines. And then after that, I will call on Dr. Chito Salazar. But before I give the floor, I would just like to acknowledge the presence of all the different agencies that are here. I really appreciate your joining us, because although many of this may not be new to you, but it's important for me that we have this interaction. That's why I also encourage that you participate if you have any questions or anything, no? I'd like to acknowledge the presence of USECA Brenda Manzano, and of DOST, and from the PRC chair, Teofilo Pilando Jr. I think the importance also of PRC being here is because in one of the previous hearings, what was brought up was that even though there is this awareness on teachers being able to shift to develop this lifelong desire to learn in the young students, for them to learn skills. Unfortunately, even in teaching schools, they are constrained to teach in a way that will help their students pass. So I really want to have this discussion on how to explore this, but I'll have to I'll coordinate with the chair of our other committees on education. But I feel that whatever progress we make in terms of acknowledging what we need to do for the future of education would require the participation of our other agencies, including the PRC. So that's the importance of your help being with us today. Thank you very much. So yun na nga. So as I said, I'm giving the floor now to Dr. Eva. Please proceed. There's no audio.
Yes.
Okay. Wala pa rin ah.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Yeah, we can hear you now.
Okay. Good afternoon, Honorable Senator Pia Cayetano and members of the Committee on Sustainable Development Goals. I'm Eva Maria Cutiong Padela Paz, and I'm here to present the position statement of the University of the Philippines, Manila. Academic experts from different fields of medical sciences, social sciences, graduate education, teaching the health professions, among others, were convened to generate this position statement. We assert that education is a human right and that education is a tool for national and cultural development. Our recommendations are based on our shared knowledge, practice, and conviction that addressing the pandemic and future challenges requires inclusiveness and a conscious bias for equity, especially to address the needs of the poor and the underserved. Advancing and implementing reforms are not possible without investing in continuous capacity building and research and ensuring timely and adequate access to the required resources. A shift to outcomes-based and blended learning approach in education that puts premium on remote learning methods under the new normal is also recommended, and a strong collaboration or partnership among various stakeholders is necessary to make this sustainable. The design and development of curriculum and teaching methods under the new normal require the following criteria: relevant, culturally appropriate, rights respecting, gender sensitive, and technologically appropriate. Fiscal provisions should allow for more budget in the education systems to ensure that the shift to remote learning methods is feasible. The University of the Philippines, Manila, as the Health Sciences Center of the UP systems, finds itself in the midst of two major developments and challenges. These are the passage of the Universal Healthcare Act of 2019 and the COVID-19 pandemic. The Universal Healthcare mandates higher educational institutions to offer curricular programs in health and health-related fields, producing health workers with competencies in the provision of primary care services. Formulation and implementation of a National Health Human Resources Master Plan that will serve as basis in the formulation of policies and strategies for the appropriate generation, recruitment, retraining, regulation, retention, and reassessment of health workforce based on population health needs has also been an important task. As a national COVID-19 referral center, UP Manila and PGH have been at the forefront of the pandemic, providing medical services to the public, conducting seminars, continuing professional development, and capacity building programs for other healthcare professionals across the country. In the light of the COVID-19 pandemic, face-to-face classroom education came to a standstill. Classes were suspended and the shift to remote learning was expedited. However, the necessary infrastructure was not in place, and our faculty and students were ill-equipped to easily adjust to this shift. Online activities were suspended when student surveys revealed that at least 30% of our students did not have stable internet access. Thus, alternative schedules and course requirements were prepared, considering that learning outcomes would not be compromised. This was a difficult task because experiential learning with patients in the clinics and in the hospital. These are necessary part of medical and health sciences education. This could not be done without compromising the safety of students, particularly in the PGH. The COVID-19 pandemic emphasized the need for transdisciplinary collaboration in research and innovation vis-a-vis national policy formulation, planning, and decision-making. The COVID-19 pandemic also highlighted the importance of translational research in the development of health technology, as well as the need to strengthen partnerships between HEIs and industry in terms of degree program development and research activities. For example, the foreseen shortage of ventilators brought forth collaborations between engineers, doctors, and entrepreneurs in producing locally made respirators and recognized the need for more biomedical engineers in the future. Thus, in the post-COVID-19 environment, medical and health sciences education will need a facelift and will require more flexible modes of learning and futures thinking in order to adapt and be responsive to the changing conditions and needs of the Filipino people, as well as the global community. The University of the Philippines, Manila believes that in order to provide innovation and improve quality of education, a comprehensive legal and regulatory framework that encourages investment in internet connectivity and services, lowers costs, and fosters creativity should be adopted. Our recommendations are as follows. Ensure reliable network connectivity. Develop a regulatory framework that stimulates investment competition and lower access prices, including special access rates for schools and colleges. Number 2, provide physical infrastructure supporting effective online education. Equip the schools and universities with facilities for effective teaching and learning methods that can be used individually or in groups, such as teleconferencing and enhancing library facilities and services. Number 3, provide effective methods to organize instruction by strengthening faculty competence in curricular activities through massive teaching training programs and activities to facilitate the rapid design process in implementation of adaptive responses to the emerging educational challenges. And lastly, empower the partnership between government and private sector in promoting and sustaining flexible learning and increased state funding of state universities and colleges. The University of the Philippines, Manila has foreseen the need to adapt to changing times, considering an increasingly volatile, uncertain, and complex world. A smart city, smart, healthy city by 2065 has been conceptualized where knowledge creation for public good is at the core of its development. At the heart of the Healthy City agenda is sustainable healthcare delivery and improved quality of life of the people. This is an intelligent solution to a healthcare system overburdened by increasing demands from urbanization, industrialization, climate change, growing healthcare costs, and an aging population. We should consider education for the jobs of the future that addresses the needs of smart, healthy cities. A smart, healthy city has three-dimensional framework: a smart infrastructure, smart institutions, and smart people. Smart infrastructure covers robust energy source, innovative transport system, and sustainable healthcare facilities. Smart institutions that promote entrepreneurship as well as tourism, and smart people where quality education, increased productivity, and social awareness are the major components. Human capital investment is crucial in developing smart, healthy cities, which is closely linked to an educational system. It has been envisioned that education in the future integrates translational research and innovation in the delivery of health services. The major health resources we envision include the UPPGH having state-of-the-art centers such as preventive medicine, a preventive medicine and wellness center, a gene therapy center, developmental medicine and disaster emergency medical center. An advanced medical treatment center will also be constructed, focusing on cancer, cardiac care, neurologic diseases, geriatric medicine, as well as the evolving practice of precision medicine. A health technology and innovation center will also be built with cutting-edge research on artificial intelligence, vaccine and drug discovery and development, genomics, proteomics, metabolomics, as well as biomedical device research closely linked to patient care services and clinical trials. Health sciences education in the future integrates translational research and innovation in the delivery of health services. We need a highly skilled workforce and a vibrant knowledge-based R&D from educational institutions. Thank you again for this opportunity to present the University of the Philippines, Manila position statement. Salamat po sa inyong lahat.
Thank you very much, Dr. Eva. I actually have a question for you, but I'm pulling out my notes from my on this topic from a previous notes that I took. So can I just invite the other resource person to speak first, and then after a few minutes, I'll pose my question to you. Can you still stay for a few minutes?
Yes, ma'am.
Sige, thank you. Okay, so our next resource person is from the Philippine Business for Education, Ms. Lovelane Basiliote, who's Executive Director. So I give you the floor, Ms. Basiliote.
Good afternoon, everyone. Madam Senator, thank you for inviting us. I'm Love Basiliote. I represent Philippine Business for Education, just for the information of everyone. We are a nonprofit that was started by the country's top business leaders. And our vision is simple. We want to help push for an education system that will enable every Filipino to lead productive and meaningful lives and contribute to national development. In the interest of time, I am actually I'm going to start with our recommendation first for the consideration of this committee. Even prior to COVID, first I want to say that this particular perspective is really good. Even though we are all facing a pandemic, having the long view in mind is very important in policy making. And so even prior to this pandemic, we've already been experiencing what we call a learning crisis, right? And during the PISA results presentation last year, we were last out of 79 countries. Majority of our 15-year-olds don't have the minimum global competency in reading, math, and science. And so our first recommendation for this committee is actually to reconvene a new education commission, something similar to what we had in the early 90s, where we really thought about the education system as a whole and not just in silos, not in in terms of basic technical higher ed, but really looking at it from a whole of system approach and making sure that we actually do think about all of these things, policies, institutions, and even the personalities that need to be there. The second recommendation is a development of a roadmap that is guided by a workforce development bill. We already see many examples of this worldwide. There's something from the state of Washington in the US, wherein they actually incentivize the private sector to to invest in workforce development. We see examples in Singapore, in India about a skills future fund. So something similar for the Philippines, really thinking about the future and how we can think about incentives, disincentives in order for many players or multi-sectoral representation to actually benefit from an education system and a workforce development system that is resilient and ready for the future. Let me just double click on my statement earlier about how this pandemic is actually accelerating what the trends that we've already experienced even before COVID. As many of the previous speakers mentioned, we are in the future is actually now, and we are living in the fourth industrial revolution. I don't want to talk too much about what kind of jobs are available, are going to be replaced or automated, but I just want to highlight this particular point, that actually it is the roles that are not repetitive, not predictable, and require strategy and creative problem solving that are considered to be resilient to automation. And so as we think about both the demand and the supply side, the demand side meaning the jobs, and the supply side meaning our education system, we need to think about how we can prepare our children, our people, for these kinds of jobs, right? Jobs that are resilient to automation. It goes without saying that the world of work has fundamentally changed, and if you are more on the pessimistic side, you will say that automation will lead to replacement, job losses. But actually, if you're more of the glass half full kind of person, then you will think about how automation will actually allow for job reallocation, or meaning a reshaping or redesign of the world of work and how you will actually go about your job functions. And so given all of these changes, the phrase VUCA has been mentioned earlier many times, how do we again make sure that we actually do prepare our children for this kind of world of work? COVID not only accelerated these trends, but also could potentially undo many of the things that we've already achieved, and in fact might make it impossible for us to actually leapfrog. So let me just talk about unemployment. In the past 10 years, we've been able to successfully reduce unemployment in the Philippines to about 5%. Underemployment also reduced from about 20 to about 15, 16%. But due to COVID, our unemployment rate actually tripled. In many of the research I've seen so far, they're saying that some of these job losses will unfortunately be permanent. And so how do we make sure, right, that both on the supply and the demand side, well, on the demand side, we generate the jobs, but then on the supply side, we actually train people for these new jobs, both the jobs that we had even pre-COVID, or the jobs that will be born out of COVID. And so frankly, it's not going to be our industry, our economy has been largely service driven. That we think will definitely change. Our tourism sector has been badly hit by this pandemic, and we want to make sure that like how do we actually spur growth so that we can generate more jobs and then get people employed. And so let me just frame some of this thinking also on just basically these three questions. I believe that sometimes, or more often than not, questions are actually more important than the answers or the solutions. Although we are trained to think about the answer right away. But I think it's good that we think about these questions so that we may frame our thinking around what is really important. So in terms of how this COVID situation, fourth industrial revolution, have actually impacted the way we train our people, we think that it has impacted on the supply side on two levels. On education and training for those who are in our school system, both formal and informal, and also in the upskilling and lifelong learning of those who are already in the workforce. So for these particular thematic areas, we did our research, we've talked to schools, students, parents, employers. these are the key questions that always come up. So education is important, it is a right. So given these new constraints, given these opportunities, how might we organize our schools and education systems so that it is actually inclusive and builds essential skills and competencies for the world now and the world in the future? And then on the upskilling and lifelong learning side, this other question is I think important in framing. So how might we incentivize reskilling? So those whose jobs will be lost or will be changed, how do you reskill them so that they are able to move to another job? In terms of upskilling, how do we incentivize them so that they will actually invest in themselves so that they can get even higher level or like better paying jobs? And then just this whole concept of lifelong learning, it's really about not stopping learning after you get your diploma, but learning something new every day. It doesn't have to always be in the formal education system. So in this, I just want to siguro end the whole context part about with these questions, like how do we future-proof or futures-proof our education system, and then in terms of how we organize it and how we incentivize its improvements. So concretely, therefore, before I go to the more very specific policy recommendations, I just want to share this quote by Carol Dweck, who is a leading psychologist when it comes to growth mindset. And I've heard from the discussion earlier, like parenting has come about, come up many times. And she talked about this and when she had this whole research about parenting. And she actually says that there is one right way of parenting. And I guess this also actually applies in education. And I highlighted it here. So it's either you prepare the path for the boy. I put in quotes the and girl because her language is a bit dated, or prepare the boy and girl for the path. And actually the right way is preparing the person for the path rather than paving the path for that particular person. And so given this particular framing, therefore, we recommend 4 things. The first one is rethinking the roles of teachers. And specifically in terms of policy, we want to align pre-service and in-service teacher development. And here we talk about filters. So I'm glad that the PRC is here because we really need to think about how we are certifying our teachers so that we only filter those who are able to teach in this new world of work, in this new way of doing education. So earlier it was mentioned that it's not about knowledge, but actually our BLET or our LET, our teacher exam, licensure exam for teachers is about knowledge. So how do we make sure that even the way we certify, we filter our teachers is or has the new education system in mind? And when we think about professional development, we also need to reinvent the way we do professional development, right? It's not about putting all our teachers in one gym, giving them like a massive professional development, give them PRCPD points, and that's it. That's not how to go about it. So how do we rethink maybe the way we filter, meaning screen, and really just so that it's really the best and brightest that make it to the teaching profession. And once they are there, the targeted professional development is given to them. The second recommendation is improving content. Here we want to emphasize that we really need to talk to our employers. They know what is needed in the world of work. We need to focus on key skills and competencies. Many in the education sector talk about a congested curriculum. I think we need to go back to the basics and really talk about these socio-emotional skills that were mentioned earlier: creativity, problem solving, teamwork, professionalism. So things like this that really need to be taught in the earlier grades, all throughout the education system. And then here, in terms of also delivering the content through various training modalities, it's not just about the formal education system. It's also about getting, tech voc there, getting employers to participate in the training. You have both formal, non-formal education, training modalities. Blended learning has been talked about many times over the past couple of months, how do we make sure that we actually have content that is appropriate for that and not just a copy pasted version of the textbook that's uploaded in a website and suddenly it's now considered online education. And then specific to the third recommendation, which is the infrastructure, I want to echo the recommendation from the earlier speakers who talked about, internet connectivity, learning devices, and we can really be very creative about it. In our study, we've seen that actually some schools don't even have electricity. Some houses don't have electricity. So making sure that we have the basic infrastructure to even be able to develop blended learning has to be there. And so if we can actually also look at how we can have a system of incentives, disincentives for the private sector to even come in and pitch in and share their resources to upgrade our infrastructure. And then finally, just to put it all together, just aligning all our efforts and engaging all our players. Specific to legislation, we really endorse a workforce development bill that will provide for a skills fund, similar to Singapore Skills Future or what is there in India. And here you have incentives for training. So essentially giving people training vouchers for them to, upskill, reskill, incentivizing employers to provide information on the future world of work, their skills requirements, and actually also incentivizing partnerships between government, industry, and academia. So in closing, I want to thank the committee for giving us this time to share our thoughts on the future of work and education. And we wish the committee good luck and good health as you come up with hopefully impactful and effective policies for a better and more resilient Philippines. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you very much, Love Basilote. I appreciate the input that you provided. And I would be very interested to work closer with you on how you foresee this workforce development bill. If you have specific inputs, kasi that can really be an outcome of our committee. So yeah, I'd like to work with you on that further. And then I just also want to share that when you mentioned, and you're not the only one who mentioned it, I think there was one or two other resource person who mentioned the concern about AI taking over jobs, etc. Some 2 years ago, I attended a smart city exhibition. I think one of the largest in China. It was attended by Jack Ma, and his specific intervention when he spoke was that he is confident that AI will not take over. So that's good coming from Jack Ma, who's like one of the leaders in technology. And that's really where our discussions on our soft skills come in. And I feel like, again, it's a disadvantage that those who probably don't have the exposure, either because their teachers also don't have time to focus on it, have not also had the training on the importance. As I mentioned earlier, I feel like I learned most of my soft skills at home. So I really feel that that opportunity to build on this, and I think it's consistent, with the skills that Filipinos already have. Our hospitable nature, our caring nature, and it will only help strengthen our position in the global workforce in the future. So thanks so much for that. But we hope to continue to, not we hope, but we look forward to really working with you closer on specific outputs by the committee. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Senator.
And let me quickly go back lang to Dr. Eva Cotuinco de la Paz. The input that I wanted to share is actually based on a book I read, which was on the Mayo Clinic. They actually put up a center for innovation. I'm not aware. I had meant to talk to Dr. Gap also about this, Dr. Gap Legaspi. But since that's basically your topic, the future of PGH and all that, the future of healthcare system of the Philippines. What we did when the committee was formed in the Senate, this committee, so it's the Committee on SDGs, Innovation and Futures Thinking. We pushed for the Department of Education to have a Futures Thinking office. and then for NEDA to also have an SDG and Futures Thinking Office. And we also, obviously, DOST, it goes without saying, no? But I think that's their trust naman talaga. And then Health Sana. So my personal position on this, and I'd like to get your feedback now or later on, is that there should really be a I mean, even if like PGH is our national university teaching hospital, no, and NIH is really there for groundbreaking research, etc., etc. I still believe that there should be this Center for Innovation, Center for Futures Thinking, that all you really do is focus on that, because you can get lost in the day-to-day work involved. So yun lang yung tanong ko, kasi when you presented it, I'm all for what you presented, but is there a separate office, that all they do is look into the future and planning the future of health?
Thank you for your question, Senator Pia. We don't have such a center yet. We started already, in terms of futures thinking, but we've started innovation hubs, especially in the College of Medicine. The College of Medicine, UP College of Medicine, just received a grant from the Department of Science and Technology that can give birth to local technologies, biomedical devices. It's a biomedical devices consortium. There are other universities who have such, like De La Salle University, but and we also collaborate with them because the hospital setting allows a place where the trial for the medical devices could be done. So,
Okay.
so ma'am, I think we totally support such an endeavor to set up a futures thinking innovation hub. We have had the chance also to work with our colleagues in the Diliman area, which is of course the College of Engineering, and we just thought about, we brought the engineers to our operating rooms, Senator, and told them, when the surgeons are operating in the colorectal area, we don't have we need a focused lighting on that part where the operation needs to be done. So these types of things are ongoing right now, Senator.
Great.
So the collaboration has begun.
That's good. But yun nga, I'm such a fan of PGH and of government workers. So I know that with all the work there, sometimes there's not even enough time to do these things, diba? That's why I'm a believer that there should be a separate center talaga. So
Yes.
that forces, there's people dedicated that's what they do. And
Yes.
in my mind, and I leave it up to you guys, in my mind pa nga, yung parang futures thinking office might even be different from a like the Center for Innovation of the Mayo Clinic. I'm reading from their their parang vision. The Center for Innovation's role is to transform the experience and delivery of health and healthcare with a patient-centered focus. So for me, that's still in the now. So iba pa yan sa futures thinking. Futures thinking yung healthy city that you presented.
Yes,
And
ma'am.
innovation is in the now. Like, what can we do using the College of Engineering, using the urban planning center, di ba? Like, what are the things that we need now to improve the patient care experience? So baka dalawang center pa nga yan eh. So if that's something that you can already think about, we can support. And then down the road, when the budgets are a little, that's just an office,
Yes,
let us know how we can support, because I want to start with PGH, because from there, then it becomes a model for the other health facilities to look into, di ba?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
We
So
welcome thank you, ma'am. I will talk to Director Gap Legaspi about that.
sige. Thank you so much. So anyway, we've called on all the resource persons for the day. We have a lot of representatives from various government agencies and organizations and academicians. Do you have any questions? If you'd like to raise a point, I'm about to suspend this hearing, and my team and I will go into our own meeting to discuss what we're going to do next. But if anybody would like to take the floor, please go ahead. But if not, I just want to thank everyone for the time that you put into this. Rest assured that as far as I'm concerned, it's valid use of your time because my team and I learned a lot. And we're really grateful that you spent time with us this afternoon. And I will be in touch with all of you because all of you gave very, very insightful interventions for us to use in the committee. So thank you very much. I'm asking my team now, anything else? Because if not, I will suspend. Okay. DOST pala. DOST has a presentation. Sige, would you like to present it now? Is this USEC? USEC Brenda? I can give you the floor now.
Madam Chair, can I request for deferment because my connection here is so poor.
Sure.
In the 2 hours that I've been here, I was disconnected 3 times. I should have gone home.
Okay. Sige,
Ito po sa Taguig, baka you can help us. Mga staff ko who are working from home have been complaining, Senator, baka
I don't think that's a city issue. Dapat mag-request kayo sa DICT ng from what I know, you probably know more than me. You need a very good cell site so that so that's not a city issue though. But I will happily tell the mayor, but that should be you directly with DICT. But don't worry, I will report it also. Sige, by all means, I would like to see your slide. So we anyway suspended naman ito. We can call on you next time.
Okay, thank you po.
All right, thank you. So stay safe, everyone, and thank you for your participation.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator. Bye-bye
Thank
po.
you.